Hey everyone, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy the audiobooks, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you'd like to support us further, consider becoming a Patreon member. As a member, you'll gain the ability to request the next part of a novel audiobook I've uploaded, depending on your Patreon tier.
It just happened. How easy it is, how fickle it is, and how weak it is that man's life could end so abruptly and without notice. I have no clear recollection of what went on. I had just finished a day of hard work in the office. Staying late was the usual, as I had no one to go home to. My parents have long since passed away, and I had Northwest siblings or close family to care or bother remembering who I was, or if I had lived or died. My life was insignificant, yet I lived it with all I had, took opportunities when they were presented to me, and was not afraid to take shortcuts. I was not a good man, and I will not deny it. But at least what I do know is that I am honest, and that will not change. I was walking down the street, down a shady alley, an alley that I have went past it uncountable times during my working life. I was a manager in an engineering company and was a few hard-working years away from making it to director. Life, though dull, filled with the daily banter and hassle of work, still had a future to present to me. Perhaps making it to the director's position was going to change who I was. And though a faraway hope, it was hope nevertheless. The last thing I remembered was the shout of a gruff-sounding man, then I received a powerful blow on the head. The pain didn't register until a few moments when my cheek was placed against the ground, my eyes could only see red, then after a small jolt of pain, I felt nothing. A dark world received me with open eyes. I turned and turned, there was no denying it, there and then, I knew I was dead. And for some reason, this welcoming darkness was not as horrid as I had believed it would be. The abyss was by no means cold nor hot. It was just it. Somewhere, I was stuck unable to move, yet with a lackluster will to do so. Why should I care for what is going to happen next, and this darkness was not as terrifying as I had imagined it. Perhaps I will be here for all eternity. Then a thought crossed my mind. God. Should I pray, ask for help? But why should I do so? This place feels rather good. As I was thinking to myself, not bothering with how much time I had spent floating in this inexistent place, my eyes flared with a burning light. I was able to see, and soon I was pulled out of the comfortable darkness into a world of pain. Had I been resuscitated? Perhaps I was taken to a hospital, I thought. Yet the scorching sun and the taste of dirt in my mouth told me otherwise. I stood up, barely able to do so, my body, not my own as I clearly was a man of 45 years old, this body was that of a child, probably 12 to 14. The clothes I wore, no robe, was a pale blue dress. I have no idea what they call these, it looked like a bathrobe only it was made of silk. I felt something heavy on my head, touching it, it was a hair bun, I unintentionally undid it and my hair fell to my waist. Surprise overtook me at first, as I looked around. A group of kids was running away in the distance where I was on a part of a small hill overseeing a small village. Every move I made hurt me in ways I couldn't describe. It was as if my body had nails pierced all over it, and with each move, one of these nails would dig deep and bring me more suffering. For some reason, such pain would have brought a man to his knees in pained gurgling cries. Yet I had the will to take in the pain, and suffer through it with sheer will. How was I able to tolerate a pain that would have undoubtedly made my old self fall unconscious? I did not know the answer then. I dragged myself toward the village. I have no idea who I was, who this body was, but if I am not mistaken, could what I have been reading when I was young be true? Was I reincarnated? And if I was, is this a world of immortals? Stories turned to reality, my dreams of youth coming true, yet as I grew up, I realized that those were nothing but fables. Yet, here and now, such fables became true. And only to make matters more concrete, a man, wearing a dark purple gown, and a golden hair bun over his head appeared right in front of me. I had no idea how he had done it. Two other men did the same and appeared right by his side. This kid is still alive, the man spoke. Yet, this was not English, I know English and his words were not it, but for some reason, I understood them. Perhaps I retained the memories of the person who had resided within this body before me. I tried to make a recollection of past events, yet nothing came to mind. It was as if this body had come with nothing but its vital function, its soul was dead. The man kept his eyes peeled upon me. making me feel like I was being probed and I could hide no secrets from him. Shen Bao, you still live. Worthless, you should have died then and there, better than to waste more of our village's resources. So, my name is Shen Bao, but what is he talking about? Lord Patriarch, he seems to be in shock, all of his meridians have shattered. He is no better than a cripple. Should we kill him and be done with it? I panicked at the hearing of the term kill. No need, we do not acknowledge cripples, he is of no use to us. Remove all of his privileges, send him back to where he came from. The world of cultivators is closed for this one. He will die, sooner or later, either by bandits, or some ruffians, or at least, by old age. The patriarch turned around and began walking. Every step he took him 10 times the distance one step a normal person can walk with. It was weird, it was strange but at the same time frightening. These were people with abilities, powers beyond what is scientifically believable. I come from a world of mathematics and physics and these people just threw everything I ever worked hard for, lived for, strove, and believed in, down the drain in mere seconds. Cultivation, can you believe this? It's actually possible. Books and stories were not false after all. I said to myself as I laughed. Come with me, said one of the 2 men that accompanied the patriarch, and he moved first. He was not walking as fast as the patriarch, but his steps were still too fast for the current me. Pain pervaded my body with every step I took, and I had to take many to get to the said city. And it was difficult to keep up with the men. It didn't take much time to get there, or so I thought, but once I arrived, there was a carriage waiting for me while the man I followed after was speaking to the driver and pointed at me. He then tucked his hands under his long sleeves and walked away. Boy, spoke the driver, to which it took me a few seconds to understand, I haven't been called a boy in a long time. I answered, yes. Get your ass in, we're moving. Right, I answered and rode along, world unknown, destination, unknown, fate unknown. My start in a cultivation world is definitely not like any of the other characters I have read about. It is probably not the worst, but definitely not the best. So, perhaps, as it was told in those fictions, fate always had a say in these scenarios, and probably it might be hiding something interesting for me too. The driver dropped me off at a village that was built around a wide river. It was undoubtedly one of the largest ones I have seen in my life. Its waters, however, were not raging, but the current was strong anyway. People were moving about in the village, some farming, some were selling food and some were fishing or just strolling around casually. This village looked like a place where one could retire. There were a few kids playing with sticks shaped like swords, playing warrior. And on the far side of the village was another group of slightly older kids, probably the age of 12 to 14, doing martial arts training and practices. This place looked like a peaceful area that one could spend their time in. I looked around, trying to figure out what to do with my life. The current me has no family or relation to anyone here, so I'm going to have to get by myself. What is the young immortal doing here? A man asked, turning around. It was an old man, of about 70 years. He looked weakened and feeble, but a gracious smile was plastered on his face. I've been sent here, I replied. Has the Shen Fu sect assigned you here for a mission? If so, I would like to help. I'm the village head. Anything you wish I could supply it to you, young immortal. Immortal? I replied. Are you not? You are wearing the Shen Fu sect's inner disciples' clothes. Oh, these, I said as I looked down, with a wry smile on my face I answered, I've been kicked out of it. I don't have anything else to wear. The village head tilted his head, wondering what I was talking about. But after a few more moments of pondering, he said, Come, follow me. And so I did. After all, I was new here and had no idea what is going on. The village head took me to the back of the village. There was a large hill overseeing the entirety of the village and there was a small shed on top of it. Right behind the shed was a large yew tree that shaded the small house from the sun. The Shen Fu Sec was once our patrons. They have assisted us and aided us. And now, it is my duty to return some of that karma back. You'll live here, and I will have people bringing you food. The head said. Wait, aren't you being a bit too generous? I mean, I didn't do anything to deserve this, I replied. The old man smiled and said, Yes, I know, but karma must be repaid, for all in this world is bound in a circle, and all that is given is taken back. One day, perhaps you shall end this karma cycle, if not, another will. I had absolutely no idea what the man was talking about, but since this was a free house and free food in a foregone world, I would be too stupid to decline it. Then thank you, I'll take you up on your offer. I replied to the man, then I added, but I don't even know your name. My name is Wang Nil. The old man smiled and said, you could rest and practice your martial arts here. I will head back to the village as I have many matters to tend to. The old man excused himself and left me by myself. I looked at the shed and wondered, this place was too dilapidated, the wood was rotten in many places, and the roof had mostly caved in. It was better than staying in the open, but not by much. However, with a few nails and wooden planks, I think I could fix it up. But where can I get those? I also need tools, a saw, and a hammer at least. I should probably check if there is a blacksmith in this village. I traced back my footsteps until I reached the village, and as I had feared, there were Northwest smiths in this place. But there was a shop in the village. Once I moved deeper, a rancid smell assaulted my nose. A man just threw a bucket full of crap in the street from his window. If I was a step too close, I could have had shit all over my clothes. When I met eyes with the man, he yelped and slammed his window shut. Perhaps he was afraid of the clothes I wore. I walked into the shop and checked up on the stuff he had for sale. Most were grains, dried food, and some candy. Hello, I said. Young immortal, how can I be of service? A man answered as he came hasting towards me from outside the shop. Weirdly enough, the man was sweating like he was scared shitless. He looked like a middle-aged man. Time was still grinding on his face, but he didn't look too unhealthy, unlike some of the people outside. Perhaps being a shop owner was enough to supply him with proper food and nutrition. For a moment I hesitated. I didn't have any money or anything to pay the tools, but perhaps doing some odd jobs for the people here can award me with a few coins, so I asked on the thought that I could just loan them. I'm looking for some tools, a hammer, an axe, and a saw if you have them. Of course I do, please wait a moment. The men walked deeper into the shop and entered through a closed door. The men hastily brought me the materials. Do you have some nails? I could use some also. Yes, the men said, and brought a box full of different-sized nails. I took a handful of them and placed them on the counter. These should do, as for payment. But before I could even speak, the men waved a hand. For the people of the Shen Fu sect I would not ask for a payment, these are not that expensive anyway. You can have them, he said. I raised my brows. This Shen Fu sect thingy was quite useful. Then I'll take you up on your offer, I replied and moved out. I headed back to the hill with a bag full of materials to work on my small shed. There was a forest nearby and a lot of trees I could use. Surprisingly, the pain in my joints and body became less and less apparent. Perhaps I grew accustomed to it, or that my brain began ignoring it. That was handy. I had a lot of things to do. I started by hacking at a large-sized tree. Some of the kids from the village came to see what I was doing. They were interested but were too afraid to get any closer. After the first hack, the axe rattled, threatening to crack and break. It was not of bad quality, but somehow the strength behind my swing. This body was stronger than your average man. So, I needed to adjust the strength of each axe blow. It took me a couple of swings to know the exact force needed to use the axe properly, and I hacked the tree down in under a minute. Once the tree was down, I began sawing it, which was surprisingly easy as the saw was sharp and it sliced through the wood like a hot knife through butter. It wasn't that the tools were sharp, or the tree too brittle, but once again it was I who was too strong to use the tools and risked breaking them due to carelessness. After having sheared off a good-sized matching plank, and what took me probably an hour or two of work, I lumped them over my shoulder and headed to the shed. I needed to get it done before nightfall. Once I was back, I tore off a few of the rotten wood, then replaced them with new planks. The hammer and the nail did a great job in securing their position, and after another hour I had a decent place to stay the night in. While I was working, I didn't notice someone placing food at my doorsteps. I had my fill of rice and a piece of dried jerky, then resumed my work. I needed to make a bed to sleep on, as the one inside the house was broken and had some things that I didn't want to touch with my bare hands. I cleared the rubble and cleaned the shed, then placed a newly made bed table inside, then got one of the kids, I say kids, but they are all the same age as me, to get me some hay. They immediately followed suit and got me some dry hay and a couple of old blankets. Night soon came. I didn't have any interaction with anyone. I had kept myself busy this morning just to evade the hard truth. I'm in a place where no one knows who I am, where technology is no longer available. Where you can't turn on the AC if you feel hot, and your bed was made of straw instead of my comfortable king-size bed. I died, this was true, and there is no changing it. But on the other side, I'm in a cultivation world. I came here unknowing of what to do, my future is unsure, but at the same time, in this kind of world, one can make their own future, forge it by their hands. And to do that, I have to first be able to cultivate. I am not fully ignorant of the workings of these types of worlds. First off, I have been too trusting to the village head, but I was still on my guard. He didn't look like the type of person who would have a malicious intent such as any run-of-the-mill character in those stories. Secondly, I have heard that my body had shattered meridians. And also, something about cultivation deviation. This means that whoever used this body has failed in circulating the thing that is referred to as spiritual energy, or the world's energy, mana, chakra, or whatever it is. And due to his failure, his meridians broke and are now useless. This is undoubtedly the reason for his death, and I had reincarnated in his body. This kid has worked his body well, it is strong, more so than a middle-aged man, probably twice or 3 times more. Which was a good advantage. But if I were to live in this world, like those characters of those stories I have read about, I need to tackle the biggest problem I have right now, the fact that I am unable to cultivate or circulate this so-called spiritual energy in my body. And to do so, I need a miracle medicine or an elixir. And those cost a lot of money. So, the most important question is, how can I get this said money? I pondered and pondered, over and over again, then it hit me like a brick on the head. Technology, it's easy, it's simple, and it's perfect. I stood up and went to the tools the shop owner had given me. They were made of rough iron and were rusty, pretty bad quality. If they were made out of steel it would have been better, sharper and more durable. I know how to make steel, it was in one of the lessons I used to attend when I started studying to become an engineer. Even if this world had steel, I know the exact percentage, carbon to iron wise, and how to make the most powerful steel. Secondly, the sewer system. I just saw a man throwing a bucket of shit down the street. This is no good. This will cause and spread diseases. Also, the water they gave me with the food was not clear, perhaps they drew it off the river. I had to start a fire and heat it first. Thirdly, the river, it's a huge power source if one could use it. Building a mill there could aid in both grinding wheats, or even making a saw watermill. Even making a dam. Also, a dam, that means electricity, light, power. There is so much to do, and it's easy to do it. But the first thing I need to do is to get proper tools. Thankfully I have the body to use and wield those tools, I have the energy to make such buildings, and I have time and patience to do them. What else can I do? I soon fell asleep. Tomorrow was going to be a big day, where I'll need to start renovating this area. I woke up to the smell of food. Someone once again placed food near my door. I had my fill and headed to the shop owner. Once I was there, the man had an angry look on his face. Kid, yesterday, you took those tools. I thought you belonged to the Shen Fu temple, but apparently you have been kicked out. I won't ask you to give them back, but I won't forgive you if you try to scam me for more of my items. I guess he must have learned the news from the village head, but no matter, I was lucky enough to check my pockets yesterday. I had a purse I didn't even notice I had tucked inside my robes. It didn't jingle due to being covered in cotton, but it had a good deal of silver and gold coins. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take anything from you without payment, but you offered before I could pay you. How much are those tools worth anyway? I asked. 2 bronze jeans. Right, I replied and pulled out the cost and handed it to him. The man's angry expression immediately turned to friendly and he was more than happy to serve. It was true, money is God, and everyone loves worshipping it. I'll be needing more things, I said. Like what? The man asked. I'll need an anvil, and more hammers, the bigger the better. Also shovels, pickaxes. I only have one of each, the man said. As for the anvil, I don't have one. You'll not find any anvil in this area, but I do have a big slab of iron you can use. Are you planning on opening a forge? For now, it's for personal use, I replied and then waited for the men to bring me the stuff. Also, do you have iron ingots? Iron ingots? What are those? He asked. I shook my head. Do you have anything that has iron in it and you don't need, even iron ore is good? Well, for now, I do have some rusty broken axes, shovels, that no one will be using. As for iron ore, you'll have to wait for the city messenger to come by. You can give him a letter and an advance payment and he will send someone to deliver it for you. Is he trustworthy? I asked. Of course, he is appointed by the city lord. I can write your letter for you. How much do you need? At least £200 for a start. Pound. I have never heard of that, young master. What is a pound? I looked around and saw a quite hefty and large potato. I weighed it in my hand and handed it to him. About this weight, I said. Oh, that's close to half a kilogram, so you need about 100 kilograms. Ah, yes. If I remember, it's 1 silver for 50 kilograms of iron. That'll be 2 silvers if you have them. Here, and this is your commission, I said, and added a few bronze coins to him. The payment was 2 silvers and 10 bronze jeans, 5 for the tools, and 5 for the merchant. He was rather happy. I grabbed the tools and took them back to my shed, then came back for the square iron slab the man had. Thankfully it was not misproportioned, as it had a few sides that looked as if they were cut by a sword. I grabbed the slab. It was heavy, but not too heavy for me. I managed to bring all the tools back to my place and began planning my work. First, to make strong tools, I'll need a furnace, and the best one for these types is a blast furnace. Sadly, the blast furnace will need a lot of time to construct and a lot of clay. I can probably make one. I already know the method and idea behind it. Second, I'll need firewood, a lot of it. The forest here is enough to satisfy my need, but I'll also need to make charcoal, and for that, I need a container to burn wood and make it into charcoal. The container needs to be made of iron, that's why I got the anvil. I looked at the tools I had. There was enough iron here to make a small barrel, and there was enough clay in the river to make a crucible. I brought a good deal of clay from the river, then began shaping it into pots. It wasn't the best pot one could make, as I didn't have a spinning table. But they were good enough to hold things in them. I also made 5 of them. The clay in the river is not pure, so there is a risk of the pots bursting once they're put in high heat. I placed the clay I took from the river on a large plank that crafted slides underneath it to make it easier to move. I didn't have the time or will to make wheels. Once I brought enough clay near my shed, I started by shaping it into a pyramid shape. With an open hole on the top, then I left a small open spot where I can place wood. I threw in some wood to heat the clay furnace, and after a good deal of time, it hardened and became operable with. Thankfully it didn't blow up in my face due to the heat. Now I have my furnace. It's not a blast furnace, but it's good enough for now. I began placing the pots inside the furnace and added more wood. Time to eat. Looking down, I noticed that my clothes had turned dirty. I need to get more clothes. Once I had my fill, I saw a young man coming over toward me. He looked to be taller than me, with brownish skin. He was muscular and had a wide grin on his face. Hello, my name is Wu Fan. Can you tell me what you're doing here? He asked. I'm Shen Bao, and I'm making stuff, I said. Surprisingly, my name or the name of this body came out of me as if I had been using it all my life. I can clearly see that, but what kinds of stuff? This looks interesting. Wu Fan said. I'm making a crucible to melt iron. What? You're going to melt iron into a jar of dirt? Are you out of your mind? The kid laughed. I didn't deign to tell him off. He was the first person to have the courage to come and talk with me. As I have noticed, most of the other kids in the village were outright scared of me, no different than the older people. You'll see, I said. After a few moments, the first pot blew up, then the second. But the remaining 3 remained strong until the process was done. Good, I said. I then brought more clay and made a large mold that I could pour steel in. I shaped it as a wide rectangle. I placed the mold into the furnace and waited for it to harden. The kid had no idea what I was doing yet, but he was interested enough to bring me wood. He had the goodwill to chop some of the trees down and make more firewood while I spent time bringing clay back and forth to make more molds for different things, and even started making bricks. Night soon came and Wu Fan had to leave and go back home. I didn't feel tired or sleepy yet, so I kept making bricks and throwing them in the fire. By morning I was soot-covered. I had to get more clothes from the shop, and once I did, I took a dip in the river. Most of the people in the village were treating me as a strange crazy man. I didn't mind it. I had a plan in mind. Once I was done, and this time I wore clothes only fit for working, made of rough wool, and I wouldn't mind them getting dirty. I kept on making bricks and setting them apart. I needed to get more to make a good furnace. Wu Fan came once again. This time he had a good idea of what I was doing, but not the purpose of it. He helped shape bricks and threw them in the furnace to heat up, while I was busy cutting wood and making even more planks. Our small businesses brought the attention of many other people who were interested in this brick novelty. They kept asking questions on how to use them, and I didn't mind sharing. Bricks were not a huge secret, and anyone with a fart for a brain would know how to do them. It was better to be nice to these people and share in some of these secrets. At least this might go back to me later in the future. Soon it was time to make the barrel. I took the crucible, which was a ceramic pot, and placed iron inside it. Broken axe heads, some twisted nails, anything that could be melted. My only fear was the pot breaking before the iron could melt. Usually, a good crucible is made with a mix of clay and cobalt. Since I don't have the latter, I'll have to count on the low quality of this iron to melt faster, as it will have a lower melting point than the clay. Thankfully my gamble worked and the iron began pooling inside the pot after an hour. The current clay furnace did not contain heat well enough, thus why I was making the bricks. They'll be used to make a proper furnace soon. After the iron melted, I got a wet towel and hurriedly drew out the pot, then poured it on the mold. It didn't take time for the iron to cool, especially after I drenched it with water to make it bend. Soon I had a rectangular iron plank. I then poured the rest of the iron on the remaining mold that were a circle shape. These will be the bottom and top of the barrel after I bent the iron plank and made my barrel. It was not big, but it was enough to make charcoal. After I sealed the badly made barrel, I placed wood inside it and locked it close. I didn't have anything to seal it with, but clay was good as it easily fit into the seams and closed the barrel. The heat from the fire under the barrel was enough to turn the wood inside into charcoal after a few hours. After I taught Wu Fan how to make charcoal, I began building the real furnace. Using the bricks I heated earlier, I placed them atop each other to make a small square room with the top open. It was larger than the clay furnace, but it will contain heat better, especially after I close it. I paid Wu Fan a bronze coin that he was pretty happy of taking. He thanked me a lot and left to his house. He was a happy kid. Night soon came and I had a good deal of charcoal ready and my furnace also ready for use. By morning, the village head came and woke me up. He was impressed with the stuff I had made. Soon, but his arrival was to announce something. The fact that I gave Wu Fan a coin yesterday was enough to entice the people into coming over wishing to work. Perhaps I didn't count correctly, but it appears that a lot of the people in this village are poor. The amount of money I had in my pouch was staggering to them. But if I were to pay everyone, it will soon end. Especially before I could begin my real plans. I'll only hire 10 people, their wage will be 1 bronze gene a day. Are you satisfied with that? I asked. How are you going to pick us? One of the men asked. I won't, you will. Discuss it between yourselves. By noon I only want to see 10 people. I don't have the time or effort to survey you all, and I don't even know your abilities. I only need the strongest of men too, I declared. The men outside agreed, and after having debated amongst them who should work and who should not, they finally chose the ones who were the most desperate and in need of money and had enough strength to work hard. Those are my favorite people, as they will work and apply all their effort for survival, and those kinds of people are always honest at their jobs. I began assigning jobs, 3 to cut wood, 3 to get clay out, 2 more to saw through the wood and make planks and logs for building, and 2 more to build the stuff I was about to draw for them. The first thing to build was a mill, right on the river. A mill will generate power enough that I could make a sawmill that will cut wood, and manning it will be easier for the workers and they will produce more wood. I got a sheepskin and drew on it the building diagram, the plan of work. A mill was not too hard to build, and the advantages it generated were huge. After giving them the diagram, they followed it impeccably. One would not believe that these people were new to this, and after all they had probably built their own houses and had a good idea of what they were doing. Soon came the shop owner. He drew me to the side and offered me a deal. I don't know how you're doing it, but you're producing a lot of material that can be sold. Do you mind if I bought them off of you and sell them? This way we'll both make a profit. Catching, this is what I was waiting for. Yes, but we'll have to talk to the village head. I want something off of him. Soon the word reached the village head and he asked me inside his home. Once I was inside, the old man was sitting and in front of him was a table with tea poured in. The man signaled both me and the shop owner to sit, and once we did, he took a sip from his tea and said, "For a young kid, you sure do have a lot of ingenious ideas. I have never seen anyone coming up with so much in so few days. It must be the teachings of the Shen Fu sect. They have been known by their ingenious ways of cultivation," said the shop owner, trying to make small talks. I didn't answer but waited for the men to speak. "So, it comes to my listening that you wish something of me." "Yes, I want to privatize my work. If anyone in the village wishes to make the same things I do, you'll have to stop them." "Why would I? Men are free to do what they want. Some even started making your clay furnaces, though most of them broke once they set them on fire." "Obviously, that will happen. The base of the furnace and the heat it should contain needs to be perfect, otherwise the whole structure will be weak." "But I'm not gonna tell him that now, am I? Because I'll be paying tax, to have my work protected. Every silver I make I'll hand over 5 bronze coins to you," I said. "Understandable, but 5 is not enough to appease the masses," he said. It was more like he said that it was not enough for his pockets. "Then 10, and I won't go a coin over," I said. 15 and we have a deal. I'll even give you a good piece of land where you can place your materials. It's close to the river and the forest." "Deal," I said. "As for me," said the merchant, "for you, once the messenger arrives, show him the materials I have. And I'll give him ways he can use them and how he can make better, stronger buildings and more powerful tools and weapons." "You have all that already set up?" asked the merchant. "Since day one, now. I'll be selling you the items at a fixed price and you'll sell them over to the people coming to this place. You'll act as a liaison and find more markets to buy from us." "I can do that. I have a lot of connections that could resell these," said the man. "Then we have a deal." I handed my hand for him to shake, but he didn't understand. "You shake it, like this." I grabbed his hand and shook it. It was awkward, but he understood eventually. Once I was done, I went back to my shed and ate my fill once again. Life in this world is turning for the better. Now I'll have a good financial stability, and after some time I should be able to afford elixirs to cure my body. I went back to watch over the workers. After a few months, the village had completely changed. Most of the people were working under me. I had finished the saw watermill, the grinding watermill, and was able to afford even more labors. I got more and more materials to craft others things. I made steel, replaced carriage wheels with reinforced steel wheels, made weapons and sold them to the messenger. Crafted goods, improved textile craft. Used the furnace to make pipes, used steel to make tools to dig the ground. Made pipelines and toilets. Innovated an irrigating system that could constantly feed the crops water without having to manually do it. All thanks to the power of the mills. Electricity turned out to be a huge problem to deal with. There was not enough copper to make wires that could span the entirety of the village. But I made sure to purchase wires whenever possible. The coating of the copper wires was going to be a hassle on its own, just coating them was going to be a problem. I could use tar for now, but I'll need a more permanent solution later, since I don't have plastic. Months upon months, the seasons turned, and I generated enough money that I was the richest man in the village. More people had heard that there was always work in Lucid Spring Village thanks to the messenger and had come in droves. The village turned to a city, and the wooden shakes and houses turned to stone and brick houses. After a couple of years, Wu Fan got married. He chose me as his best man. Since he was my right-handed man, he made a good fortune for himself and got himself the prettiest girl in town. Not that I ever cared, but he was an honest man. So far, my view on the cruel world of cultivation began to change. The people here were the same as back on Earth. The strong eat weak mentality was not ingrained into them. They helped and aided each other. I have been offered the daughters of many of the people in this town, but I had chosen not to get married yet. I have more and many things to do still. Today will be my 5th year on this new world. I am in either my late teens or my early 20s, not sure of the exact age of this body. But this would make me 45 years old counting the years I lived on Earth. I find it strange that I am being offered girls not even half my age. But it's never been my goal to sit down and make a family. I needed to pursue the path of cultivation. Though I have been informed that the later one starts down this path in life, the lesser their achievements, that didn't not stop me from pursuing it. And today is the day that a man will be arriving with an elixir that I have paid a literal fortune to order. He said that it was made by some powerful immortal cultivator, an elixir that could repair meridians and rejuvenate them. I waited patiently at the village's entrance waiting for the person to arrive. Soon a man wearing a black hooded robe appeared right in front of me. I didn't see him or hear him, he just materialized in front of me as if he was invisible. "You're Shen Bao?" he asked. "Yes," I nodded. The man looked me up and down and said, "Your meridians have been broken for a long time. This elixir might help, but I doubt it would be of any great use. Are you sure you want it? I can't promise great results." At least he is honest, and I don't care, as long as there is hope. "I will try it." "Yes, hand it over," I said. "Payment," the man said. I snapped my fingers and two men carrying a large chest came running toward me. They placed the chest in front of the robed men and backed away. I opened the box for the cultivator, and glittering gold assaulted his eyes. "Good enough," he said and waved a hand, making the whole box with its content disappear somewhere. He then handed me a bottle, a small vial with a red glistening liquid inside it. "Bath yourself in these herbs, burn incense and clear your mind before you drink this," he said and threw a small box full of strong scented herbs at me. The moment I picked them up, he was nowhere to be seen. I went back to my house, yes, house now, a pretty big one, it took 8 months for it to be built, and walked inside. I had a few maids, women who offered their services to take care of the house in exchange for a few coins a month and food. They prepared my bath with the herbs and I did as the men said. Once I felt myself relaxed and refreshed, I drank the potion. The material inside it melted in my body, it coiled around my stomach like a burning sun then spread all over my body. The heat it generated was enough to boil the water I was in, but surprisingly it didn't boil me with it. I felt my joints cracking, and deep, almost within the bones and flesh, I felt tingling. These were the same spots that pained me when I first came to this world, these were the meridians. They vibrated, more and more. I began breathing heavily, my body temperature rose exceptionally high, but there was hope. This elixir felt like it was the nectar of life, that energy began assaulting my body aiding in reconstructing it. However, it didn't last for long, as the power behind said energy dissipated, faded, and was no more. I couldn't feel any change and the tingling faded. The current village doctor was a cultivator, he arrived here due to hearing that it was a cheap and nice place to stay. I went to him asking him to see if the elixir had worked. All I received was a shake of the head. "You should give up, Shen Bao, it is too late, you have a good deal of money, you can live your life free, you can live as a king, and you have a good heart and a solid mind. You don't need to go down the solitary path of cultivation," the doctor advised, but I declined to answer. Yet another hope crushed. Years had passed, and I tried more elixirs, some were so expensive one could literally buy cities over with. But it was not enough, it was never enough. Year after year, I was assaulted with a deep depression, I even took a spouse and had 2 kids. Both boys, they brightened my life a bit, and made me forget about my obsession for a while. However, old age was a constant reminder to me that this life I am leading was finite, and the dream of cultivation was soon going to be forgotten. I became the next city head, Lucid Spring had already turned to a large city by now. And with this power I was able to move more men to get even more money flowing into the city. And with it, my pockets grew heftier. Many of the people in the city were blessed with kids that were able to cultivate. They had lived a good life, ate good food, and were able to raise healthy children that were attuned with nature and could harness the energies of the world. Unlike my children who were unable to, I even spent more money on them to gain the ability to harness the spiritual energy, but it was futile. I even heard rumors that it was my fault, and due to my shattered meridians, that my children were cripples. My wife, Yuming, passed away giving birth to our 3rd child. She was a girl, but she also didn't make it through childbirth. My 2 other kids, Lu Bao and Xiao Bao, grew up fast. They didn't have the same mindset as I did. They did not pursue knowledge and didn't ask me or didn't wish to learn of what I knew. It seems that physics theory was going to die with me. Time passed on, and I was in my 70s. My children had children of their own, but I could feel it in their hearts that they did not enjoy my company, perhaps because I was too engrossed in my obsession that I never gave them time. They rarely came to visit as they had parted to other cities. But as it happened, today was the day I heard of an even better elixir, made by a nascent soul cultivator. Thought I don't know what rank of cultivation that is. The doctor confirmed that the owner had an ungodly and steep cultivation level. After I gathered my belongings, as I knew I should be the one to go there and present him the money I have gathered, my 2 sons Lu Bao and Xiao Bao came along with me. I felt glad that they wished to accompany me this time, that they finally saw what I was attempting to do and are supporting me. Oh, how blind have I been, I should have seen it coming. Lu Bao chose to lead the carriage while Xiao Bao rode inside with me. The conversation was dry, and besides telling me on how his own kids and wife were doing, he replied with nothing else. After 10 days' travel, we had to take the carriage along a steep mountain. The road was tough, but it could still fit a carriage as ours. And once we were halfway through the mountain, Lu Bao stopped the carriage. They wanted to rest, they said. I left the cabin and went to check out the scenery. The sun was coming down, and the world looked at peace. Greenery spanning distances unknown, a place where beasts roamed free and no sane man would move through. This forest has always been the bane of hunters, and only those in desperate need would ever wander it. Unbeknownst to me, Lu Bao was behind me. He didn't speak, he only shoved me with all he could down the mountain slope. Surprised, shocked, and unable to understand, the last I saw was the spiteful look on Lu Bao and Xiao Bai as I fell down the steep mountain, betrayed by my own children. It hurts. The fall, as I saw the last facial expression on the faces of my children. It hurts, it hurt more than the impact against the rocks, more than the cuts and bruises, more than the broken leg I received. And it definitely hurt me more than when I stopped rolling, and my body finally began assessing the damage and sending pain signals all over the broken areas. I couldn't feel my face, I didn't know if that was a blessing or a curse. But the rest of my body was in an infernal agony. I could barely breathe, my lungs were laboring to get some air in. But with every breath, a sharp pain electrified my chest. My right leg was twisted out of place and definitely broken from the look of it. It will be a pain to set it back. I didn't notice at first, but the fall was pretty high. It was so high that I couldn't even see the ledge I was thrown off from. This hill or mountain was definitely steep. And the fall I took should have killed anyone immediately. But it was all thanks to this body, though in my late 70s. I was still stronger than your average man, and definitely more resilient. However, my resilience will not save me from the fangs of a starved demon beast. And in this forest, these beasts were aplenty, or so has many of my lucid spring city had claimed. A lot of its people went here to hunt, but many left their lives here in search of riches. They were powerful and experienced hunters, and I was nothing more than an old man, easy prey for any that happens to pass nearby or fall upon my scent. I tried to drag my body, but I failed miserably. Even my arms, which I felt had suffered the least damage, had finally started broadcasting the pain in them. They were both bruised, and I probably sprained my wrist. Still, I tided through the agony and managed to get on one knee. I looked up at the mountain I dropped from. There was no way I could climb back. Perhaps I could trace along the mountain's base and end up back at the path that led through it. I could wait there for a few days, and a caravan could help me by then. This was the plan I set for myself, and I was about to execute it. Yet my body didn't respond. I noticed that I was shaking, signs of an incoming shock. If I fall into shock, I will definitely never wake up from it. I bit the tip of my tongue, it hurts, really bad, yet this jerking pain, added upon the constant pain my body was feeling, woke me up and stopped the shuddering. I have to get out of here, I thought. I dragged myself forward, with one barely functioning arm and leg. Feeling utter exhaustion after every move. And in no more than 10 steps, I fell back to the ground. This is not going to work, I said to myself. I needed a way to mend my broken body. Catching a twig with my hand, I thought, I could probably use this with some rope to put my foot in place. Also, with a couple of stronger and sturdier sticks, I could make a cane. I laughed to myself, it has been years since I last crafted anything. Being the city lord had pulled me away from these manual tasks, as I had assigned many people to do what I had in my mind after presenting them with the corresponding diagrams. But now, I'm back to my starting days, and that manual crafting is probably the only thing that has supported me, was with me, and never betrayed me. Do it yourself. I forced my hip and twisted my leg, snapping it back to place. The pain was enough to drop me unconscious, but with another forceful bite of the tongue, I was back. If I do this more, I might end up biting my tongue off. I got more twigs and sticks, placed them around my foot, then strapped them with a piece of cloth I tore from my robe. Then I dragged myself forward. Finding big sticks for walking in a forest wasn't hard. And I used them to pull myself up. I could now move. But my breathing was becoming a problem. With each breath I took, the more pain I suffered, and this was not good. I fear that one of my ribs, if not more, are broken, or it had damaged or worse, punctured my lung. Though the last option was daunting, it was not possible. I was still alive and didn't suffer lung failure, yet. As I moved about, I felt a powerful gust of wind blowing above me. Looking up, I saw a man. He was floating. It took me a couple of seconds to realize that I was not dreaming, and this man was actually floating. He looked like a middle-aged person, wearing cultivator clothing, black and purple. The only cultivators I ever met were from the Shen Fu sect, and others from minor sects, but even among these sects, I have never seen one able to float in the air. The man looked at me, with that same probing gaze that many other doctors have done to me. "You'll work," said the man, and without even touching me, he grasped with his hand and I was lifted off the ground. Pain, back-breaking pain assaulted my body. It felt like an invisible titan grabbed my whole body and I had no say in the matter. I couldn't even speak. The pressure on my lungs was enough to shut me up. The man flew over the forest with a speed so amazing I thought I was on a high-speed jet. He kept moving above the forest, headed to a direction only he knew. And once again I had no say in the matter. I fainted somewhere along the road. And only woke up to the sound of agony. Not mine, but many, many, many others. I was inside a cave, more like a cavern. Its ceiling was high, and it was lit thanks to a few torches placed on the cavern's walls. A few things caught my attention. The first, a pungent purple-colored pool in the middle of the cave. The second, a bronze door, filled with symbols, and words I didn't know what they meant. And in the middle of this bronze door was a handprint. Lastly were the cultivators around the room. There were 5 of them. Each with different clothing, different sections. They were our prisoners. Yes, I said our, because there was not just me. The people with me, men, women, children. Of all ages and races. Dark, white, brown, and many. They were all held down with some sort of power that I had just noticed. It caused us to remain unmoving, unable to resist. And why I say resist, is that one of these 5 people, a man also of middle age with dark long hair and a crimson-colored robe, sat in front of the pool. He grabbed the people around the cave and pierced through their skin with his finger. Rapidly, so that blood didn't even have time to sprout out. The man would then throw whoever he had pierced through into the pool, where they shout, cry, and scream in utter complete madness. If I were to guess, this pool was so painful to the touch that they had the look of a person wishing to die the moment they touched it. Yet whenever one of these people was thrown into the pool, this purple liquid moved as if it had a will of its own, draining them, drowning them, and ultimately killing them. This liquid, viscous, with a mind of its own, it moved and went through these people's mouths, nostrils, ears, and eyes. Then ultimately dragged them down without them ever returning back up. More people did, and I sat there, unable to do anything to resist my approaching doom. Fate. I have started believing in it, when I first came here, that I will be able to change my life and do something with this life. That my body, though unable to cultivate if I use my brain well enough, that I could circumvent this situation. And then be able to become a cultivator. Yet what is fate when one like these cultivators is able to bind your life, bend it and do whatever he wants to you without you ever having the chance or opportunity to go beyond his clutch and escape? What is life when one can kill you at his whim? Fairness. Fate. I call bullshit. These were the last thoughts that crossed my mind as it was now my turn. I haven't even noticed how many people were thrown into the pit. Grab him, another man said. And the one wearing crimson grasped his hand, and the same feeling enveloped my body, as I was being carried by a giant's hand and taken all the way to the man wearing crimson. I was unable to talk, something was preventing me from, all I could do was moan, but they didn't care about that. The man was about to pierce through my skin and throw me to my death. And I had no say in the matter. How loathsome. Yet before the men could even pierce my skin, the other guy, the one who brought me in, said, "There is no need, his meridians are already shattered." The men carrying me looked back at me with that same probing gaze, and shrugged, then threw me to my demise. It felt bad, worse than anything I have ever suffered before. And if the falling form, a cliffside, was comparable to a pat on the back, this pain was a full-scale whipping with a notched iron whip. Only this whip was made of molten steel. I was going to die, and I could do nothing about it. As I suffered an agony 100 times worse than drowning, As the vile liquid penetrated through my nostrils and lungs, it made me feel as if I was drowning in liquid lava. With every bit and piece of my body in utter and complete agonizing pain. I wanted to scream, and when I did, I instantly regretted it, as I have let the liquid that felt like a living thing access to my body. The liquid, a nefarious, destructive, and painful substance, enveloped me and pressed against every fiber of my body, making me wish that death would come and claim my life as fast as it could, but the Reaper was too slow in his work that I wanted to curse at him. I wasn't dying any time soon. And it took a lot of time for the cultivators to notice that I am still alive and in utter pain. I lost sight in one of my eyes, the burning pain from my broken leg increased 10 folds. And my back felt like it broke and was reconstructed, but in a deformed way. I was suffering. It was as if the liquid was morphing my body, molding it like clay dough to the shape it wanted. He still lives. Good, one of the cultivators said, then the same power pulled me from the pool. Like a hand that grasped on the body of a small bird, making it feel useless and unable to do anything but beg for the mercy of its captive. He threw me against the pool's rim. I fell on my back, gasping for air that resisted contending against the burning liquid in my lungs. I was unable to see well, my mind was in chaos, and my lungs were full of the disgusting liquid. I retched and coughed out whatever I could, but I felt like there was much more left inside my lungs as they burned with every breath I took. "You, what's your name?" asked one of the cultivators. He was the man with the crimson robe. He was addressing me. I didn't want to annoy him, so I spoke through grit teeth, "Shen Bao." "Shen Bao, today is your lucky day. You'll be of service to an immortal, rejoice and take pride in it," said the man earring crimson. His gaze, however, was filled with scorn, as if he saw me as nothing but an ant, a tool to his devices. A nonentity. It was humiliating, to be looked down upon, to be treated this way, and to be expected to be thankful to your torturer, but for now, they hold the keys to my survival, and I could do nothing but follow their orders. Perhaps I could live. You've survived the bone and body grinding poison. That is a feat not even we immortals could do. That means you're fated to be of great use to us. "Brat, move to that door, and place your hand in it," said the man. "Brat, no matter how you look at it, I look much older than him. But if he is an immortal, the same as the ones in those books, then he could be hundreds of years for all I know. So he is probably right in calling me brat." I looked forward from where I was lying down. There was a golden door there, filled with writings of all sorts. I didn't understand any of them, but in the middle of the writings was a palm print. "Place your hand on the palm print. Once you do that, that door will open, and you'll be set free. I even have your antidote. You'll be good as new once you drink this," the cultivator said. Brand as new. I finally realized what he meant as I looked at my hands. I was a healthy old-aged man. I still had muscles and a good build, but after being dipped into that pool, everything changed. My skin turned pale green, pustules and odd tumorous blobs grew abnormally all over my body. This looked like a severe case of neurofibromatosis. I've read an article about it once. I was a monster. "Hurry." I tried to stand up, but my right leg gave up on me. The broken bone hadn't healed yet, and with the bone and body grinding poison, it had undoubtedly been affected, and now it's in an even worse condition. "Move," shouted one of the cultivators, and I had no choice but to do so. I dragged myself forward, feeling every part of me in utter agony, every bone of my body screaming in pain as I moved forward. The pain was too much, yet I didn't faint or fall unconscious. I cursed the strong constitution of this body, as it would have spared me much of this pain if I was just a weak normal human. Once I reached the gate, the crimson-wearing cultivator said, "Press your palm there, brat. We don't have much time." I did as I was told, all for that antidote. If I get it, I could get rid of these disgusting features. Once my hand locked onto the gate, it felt like it was glued. Something pricked me in the palm, and a gust of blood surged out from the palm print and spread all over the door. I felt dizzy and anemic. But I still couldn't fall unconscious. I dropped to my knees huffing once the door creaked open. "It's open. We finally did it. 10 years of hard work finally got us here," the crimson-robed cultivator spoke in glee. The door kept opening, revealing the inside. The cultivators rushed toward the door. They wanted to claim what was there. But something was not right. Right in front of me was a purple-colored skull. It was too big, almost as big as the door's size. It looked like a ghost, ethereal and see-through. Yet the cultivators didn't seem to notice it, or even care about it if they did. Soon, the purplish skull dissipated into a cloud of gas and fell to the ground, seeping like a coiling snake. It came to me, but the moment it touched me, it removed itself and went away, looking for something. The purple smoke also avoided the cultivators, but they still didn't seem to notice it. It went out, probably that was the ghost of someone, and it was leaving the dungeon we're in. The cultivators all went inside the new room, but I grabbed at the last one's robe and said, "The antidote." The cultivator smirked in my face and said, "Do you think if we had the antidote we wouldn't have dipped ourselves in the pool and opened the door ourselves?" "Foolish mortal, now die," he said, and lifted his leg up to stomp on my face. Yet the earth trembled, and a shaking far worse than anything I have ever felt before started. The scarce light that came from the exit of this dungeon was cut off. And the volume of the purple fog began increasing in the room. The people who were chained began falling unconscious. It was sudden and silent. Like nothing I have ever seen before, it was like a spell to make everyone fall asleep. Yet, their bodies shriveled up and dried up right in front of my eyes. Not even the cultivator who wanted to stomp my head into the ground was saved from this fate. Even he was turned to a skeleton, then his skeleton turned to ash. All that was left of him was his clothes and a small brown pouch. The cave was silent. For the first time since I got here, it was as silent as the night. No more came the sound of wailing and pained moans, not even the sound of the cultivators who went into the room. "I can't stay here." Perhaps the purple ghost had ignored me at first was a coincidence, but I doubt it will do it again. There was no way out from where we got in from. There is only the cave. I dragged myself forward and entered the door. I expected to see a large room or a corridor spanning hundreds of meters underground, but I was met with a small room, no bigger than one of my sleeping chambers in my palace at Lucid Spring City. How I miss my comfortable life. This is my first encounter with real cultivators, not those practitioners who barely know how to do alchemy or potion making that claim to be cultivators. The people here had utter disregard to mortal life. They were arrogant, boisterous, and domineering. They did what they wanted, with little regard to life or morality. These were evil. But my fate is sealed with these people. I can't do anything in my current weakened state. No, I couldn't even do anything even if I was 50 years younger. But I have to move forward. And I did. But there was no one there, not even the cultivators that entered. There didn't seem to be a way out of this room, and I didn't see anyone leave. Looking around, I noticed that the ground was riddled with ash, and among the ashen remains were the robes of the cultivators. Everyone is dead. Even those people who could crush me like an ant, they too were crushed like one. What madness is this? Why among all was I spared? My mind couldn't adapt to the current scope of things. Cultivators that were mighty as gods were destroyed and made to look like they didn't account for a thing. They were a nonentity in the eyes of that purple ghost. I looked back but didn't see any signs of that floating skull. It was here no more, or probably it is hidden waiting to see what I would do. I conned myself. If that skull wanted me dead, I had no ability whatsoever to defy it. So as long as I still live, perhaps I still have a chance to get out of here. I gathered the robes and pouches of the dead cultivators and tried to pry one open. None of them opened up for me. They didn't seem to budge or move. Disgruntled, I tore the red dress of the crimson-wearing cultivator and made a bigger pouch that I gathered all of the pouches in. I looked around some more but didn't find anything of interest. Nothing was here but old broken vases, withered vines, and mold. Yet my eyes gleamed onto something. A small green book with golden engraving was on the ground, almost fully covered by the ash of one of the cultivator's remains. I went to the book and hesitated. Was this what they came here looking for? My curiosity outbid my sanity and I grabbed at the book. Almost instantly my mind went blank, then a surge of golden writings imprinted themselves in my mind. Life and death, all handled by the hands of the mighty. Yet life begot death and death begot reincarnation. Life can be saved, and death can be spared. For in medicine, there exists poison, and in poison there exists medicine. I had no idea what these writings mean, but one thing was certain. Under this passage, a sentence was written that made me shudder. Poison God's heritage. Cultivation manual. Almost immediately, my excitement dulled. There was no way I could use this. I was not a cultivator. Perhaps I could sell it to get a good elixir. I decided to flip one of the pages to see what was in the book, and lo and behold. Fate has not given up on me yet. To cultivate the poison god's technique, one must first sever his meridians. The meridians are the base of all spiritual cultivation path. But the poison god's technique is a path like none other. It doesn't need spiritual meridian, but poison meridian. Seeing as you have the ability to read through this book, then you have survived the bone and body grinding poison. Your shattered meridians are unfit to use this manual, but once the bone and body grinding poison penetrates through them, it will mold them, refine them, and make them into poison meridians. You will be able to cultivate energy unlike any other, a spiritual poison energy. Consuming poisons will be your way of cultivating. Building a strong cultivation base depends on the quality of the poisons you have consumed. Seeing that you are my one and only disciple, I have left you a gift. It is the pool of bone and body grinding poison. Consuming it will establish a good cultivation base, and then you can go and venture in the world to find more poisons to consume so you can increase your cultivation. After reaching certain stages, normal poisons will not harm you but rather benefit you. And even deadly ones that could turn a cultivator to ash will be like a fresh breeze to you. However, this comes at a grave cost. You have to be smart about what you consume, as your body cannot sustain the top-grade poison and they could still kill you if you eat them. Lastly, you are going to die. This is a fact, know it, live with it, and fear it. The bone and body grinding poison will destroy you unless you control it and morph it in your own poison and then use it to kill your enemies. But that is not all. To learn the poison god's technique, you will have to live with a frightening secret. This technique will help you become stronger, younger, faster, and more powerful than anyone. But you are against the clock. This manual is a curse as much as it is a blessing. You are urged to rise in your cultivation. You have 1 year to reach qi condensation. Here is the method you will use to circulate your poison qi. Under that text block was a picture of a man, sitting in the lotus position and 4 points were marked in his body. If I remembered correctly, these were one of the 4 points that the cultivators destroyed to those homeless-looking people, then threw them in the pool. These are locations for meridians. And I needed to circulate this poison qi thing exactly as the manual shows. There were also tons of details on how to circulate energy and even a skill that can be learned once I reach the first level of qi condensation. I have looked all my life for a way to cultivate, yet I failed many times over. I cursed the fact that I was unable to cultivate, and that my meridians were shattered. Yet, even those shattered meridians came back with a gracious gift. They helped me survive death, and they also helped me start on the path of cultivation. I looked at the manual and sighed, this might not be the best start in a cultivation world. Where other people got a magnificent mentor, a great treasure, or a godly cultivation skill. All I have gotten was an old hunched back body filled with pustules and disgusting tumors. And a cultivation manual that will kill me if I didn't reach the next stage within 1 year. Not the best start, but definitely beats dying right here and there. I was given a chance, and I'll make sure to make the best use of it. The book, the green book, vibrated in my chest. I had placed it inside my robes so I wouldn't casually leave it somewhere and forget about it. I'm old, it happens sometimes. I opened the book and there were few more lines written there that I didn't see the last time. ===. Being able to read this line means that you have successfully reached the lowest tier of qi condensation. Since you're able to read this, your cultivation level has increased. As a disciple of my arts, you must not have ever been in contact with cultivation, as it needs a fresh sprout that has no meridians unlocked to learn it. So I shall impart upon you some wisdom that will aid you in your path. All cultivation levels are divided into 9 levels. And these 9 levels are also divided into 3 distinct layers: bottom, middle, and peak. For the qi condensation, it is composed of the following layer and sub-layers: bottom low, bottom medium, and bottom peak. Middle low, middle medium, and middle peak. High low, high medium, and high peak. Having reached the bottom low qi condensation, your lifespan has increased by 2 more years. You're urged to reach the bottom medium qi condensation level within these 2 years. If you were a regular cultivator, you would be able to sense the world's qi, the spiritual energy, and start absorbing some of it to circulate your qi. Though it is the most obvious of methods to increase your cultivation, it would take a great deal of time. Some skip this by consuming pills that can generate a good deal of spiritual energy and is much purer and can be rotated with ease. Yet, this method is not without fault. It will make the foundation unstable if one was to rely on pills to increase their cultivation, and will create a subpar cultivator in the future that will be stuck and unable to ascend to further heights. The pills made by alchemists may be good, may be great, but they can never match the perfectness of the world's energy. As for you, disciple of mine, you are treading a path only I have walked through before you. Our path is lonely and full of danger. To increase your cultivation, you'll need the energy of plants, poisons, and bugs. It is the same as consuming pills in a sense, only these pills are not made by men, they are made by the heavenly will and are as pure as nature's own energy. Here is the diagram of the only spell you'll be able to use once you stabilize your cultivation at bottom low chi condensation. Under the text was a picture of a man rotating his energy in the same manner that I have done while meditating. The only difference is that, instead of continuing the rotation to increase their cultivation, they channel it toward their mouth and breath out a fog. I sat down and began mimicking the picture of the man in the book. After a few rotations of energy, I willed the energy to leave through my mouth, and a substance green as a liquor bottle shot out from my mouth, then transformed into a small puff of green smoke. The green smoke touched against a cave alga and it instantly withered. Poison breath! I exclaimed. I just learned my first new spell in a cultivation world. I continued using the same spell, to understand my limits and how far I can go with it. The drawback, and the number of times I could use before I'm fully exhausted. So far I understood that I could only use it 3 times in a row, and a 4th time after half an hour. But if I were to use it for the 5th time, I would drop unconscious. So, 5 is the limit. At least right now and at my current level. If I were to increase my cultivation, I would undoubtedly increase my tolerance and my ability to cast more of this spell, and perhaps even more potent grades of it. This all, on the premise I increase my cultivation, and judging from the size of the pool, I guess it will be difficult. The pool that I had consumed poison from had its size already decreased by half. Thanks to me, drinking from it constantly for sustenance and supplementing my needs of poison chi. Days went by, and they were boring, utterly and completely boring, nothing to do, a dark cave that had no secrets. Believe me, I checked by turning every rock and stone. There was nothing left, even from the corpses of those poor people, besides a few coins, there was nothing left in the cave. The pool's level dropped further. With each day, I would consume a large portion of it until a month went by and the pool had nothing else to give me. I found out that I was able to ingest larger and larger amounts of the poison without it actually increasing my cultivation to a visible degree. But the totality of the pool ingested had actually increased my cultivation level by 1 layer. A few days ago I had achieved chi condensation bottom medium level. Yet, sadly, I found nothing of interest or new on the Poison God's book. Perhaps I need to reach a higher cultivation level to unlock something new. Yet without the bone and body grinding poison, there was no way for me to supplement my poison chi, and thus no way for me to increase my cultivation. It's time to leave this cave. I packed everything I could and found it useful. There was nothing much actually, just the bags of the people who brought me and those poor fellows here. Anything else had completely melted by the purple poison that I haven't seen lurking around here ever since the first day in this cave. I walked up to the cave's caved-in entrance. Large boulders were holding off the exit. No way for me to leave but a small crack that was leaking some of the world's sunlight. Getting out from that small crack was impossible. So I needed to find a way out. I checked the rocks and noticed that one small rock was actually supporting the majority of the rocks around it. I was lucky. Because if I had to physically move these things, I would need to at least be 40 years younger. I was no longer as nimble or as strong as I was before, so if I were to move that small stone out of its place, the rest of the boulders will definitely come falling down on me. I wouldn't want that right now. I remembered seeing a spear somewhere around here. It probably belonged to a hunter that was brought with us to this place. It could do well if I were to use it to move the rock from a distance. I went back to the corpses of the poor men, women, and children, and among them was a spear and a few old or barely functioning hunting tools. I took the spear as I had no use for the rest of the stuff laying there, nor did I have the proper knowledge to use them. A bow in the hand of an amateur is as useful as a sledgehammer to a toddler. The spear would do perfectly. Once I had the weapon in hand, I headed back to the entrance, then began poking, and poking, and poking at the small rock. Using too much strength would probably strain the spear and make it snap. So I had to be careful. And thankfully, after a long time of poking, the rock was dislodged, and the rest of the boulders followed as they rumbled down. crushing each other and rolling on the ground. Thankfully I was far away that none of the rocks managed to hit me when the whole thing came down. The small crack in the formation opened up and became wide enough for me to squeeze myself in. And so I did, as I had to climb the now unsteady rocks, and get out of the cave. A cool breeze assaulted my face as I took note of my surrounding. A forest, the same forest that my kids had thrown me into, was what met my eyes. And only then when I finally was forced to face a situation that I was hardly and intimately trying to avoid. I was betrayed by my own children. There was no justice in this world, cruelty, and unfilially, my sons have betrayed me. Sons that I have neglected, but still they are my sons. Though I was not the best parent, I definitely was not the worst. I did not deserve what happened to me. I had given them all I could, made their lives worry-free, yet greed still managed to eat at their hearts. They threw me off to the wolves so they would claim my fortune to themselves. Should I go back to Lucid Spring? A question that I immediately answered. I have nothing left there, and turned to have the sun against my back, and headed deeper into the forest. There was no way for me to return there, and even if I did, what good will it bring me? I finally made it to a cultivator. I have finally achieved my dream. Why should I be tied to them? Why not find how this world of cultivation works? With a spear in hand, and a pack made of the clothes of one of the cultivators, I moved ahead. There was nothing to look for behind me, and only one way forward. So I limped forward. Yes, limped. The damage to my leg was still severe. The bone definitely did not heal right. My left eye is botched, and I could no longer use it, and the large and gross number of pustules on my entire body made me no different from a monster to any man's sight. I was disgusting to look at, disgusting to speak to, disgusting to even have in one's presence. But that would work perfectly for me. The more unsightly I am to people, the less likely they will bother me. As I walked through the forest I felt at a loss. The sun was going down, and the forest began to turn colder. Hunger and thirst were the least of my worries. As a beginning cultivator, I understood that my body no longer requires food and sustenance, but that is of course rather situational. I would die of hunger eventually, but I have a better tolerance to it than any normal human. The worst, however, was the fact that I am not in any form or shape able to protect myself from monsters or demonic creatures if I were to face one of them. Parties of my Lucid Spring city have died here in the forest as they ventured to find materials here. They were strong and powerful hunters that came in groups, yet sometimes none of them were able to survive. I on the other hand am old, weak, limping, and with a spear that I mostly could only use to support myself to walk. Encountering one of these monsters would mean my immediate death. Yet, it shouldn't be that easy to meet up with one of them. At least from what I remember, demonic monsters are a rare sight. Or so I thought as I heard a loud growl behind me. Turning, I saw a shadow of a creature. It looked feline, and only the brimstone-colored gems of eyes it had were bright enough for me to see what it was. It easily moved around me without making a sound. Its steps were light. Moonlight shone from between the cracks between tree leaves, revealing a spotted leopard-shaped creature, only it was the size of a horse. He had two saber-toothed fangs that were barred at me. They reflected some of the moonlight and showed me how dangerous they were. The leopard pounced. In my current condition, never mind running, not even a simple walk was possible. With the heavy broken leg, and the oldness of this body's bones, I was nothing more than an appetizer for this creature. I had no way to escape, no way to beat it or hide from it. Death has raised its scythe and is preparing to lob off my head with it. Death? How many times has it been now, from the time my kids threw me to my doom, to the cultivators who drowned me in a pool of poison, to the suffering I had at the hand of that poison? Death is easy, and it comes cheap, and now I was going to die, in a random spot, in a random place, facing a random creature. Death is easy, but at the same time, only those who surrender to it would die without fighting back. I may not be the most courageous of people, nor the bravest, or the strongest, but I had a will to survive, and a goal that I have just began achieving. I'm a cultivator, a weak, pitiful, and dismissible cultivator in this world, yet I made it here, with my own effort, and I will not forgive myself if I were to lose this life of mine due to some odd and random monster. The wrath and refusal to accept such a meaningless death made these old bones of mine move. The leopard lunged at me only to find emptiness in the jagged and sharp claws of his. The creature growled as it turned, to find me half sprawled on the ground. I had rolled away, only it was barely enough for me to escape from the creature's claws but not enough to save myself from hitting my wounded leg against the ground. Pain assaulted me from all over my body, but I grit my teeth against it. Cry later, fight now. I locked my eyes to the slit pupils of the now enraged predator. It seems that it was annoyed that such an old weak prey managed to evade its initial attack. There was no way for me to outdo the massive strength of such a large feline. But I didn't need to rely on muscles that have long since been weakened, nor fingers that were plagued with necrosis, or my body that barely had enough power to carry itself. I had a weapon, and I had to use it. What better way than to use that than now? It's free practice. Correction, it's a practice that if I don't succeed in, I'll die. A grin crept up my old face, and my heart began beating, thumping loud enough that I could feel it revibrating through my entire body and bombarding my eardrums. Adrenaline rush. I'm excited. It has been a while since I had ever been in such a good mood. Come at me, kitty. I spoke and the creature pounced at me as I just pushed myself from the ground, aided by the spear in hand to pivot my whole body away from the large cat. I rotated the energy within me, creating a full circle before releasing it in a loud inhale then exhale of dark green fumes that shot out then spread like a fog in a misty forest. The fog assaulted the tiger's nose then the rest of its body then spread along the area. The tiger didn't even notice what was going on. Then came doubt. Poison would need to slowly interact with the leopard's bloodstream before it could actually be lethal. And that could take from minutes to hours to days, depending on this creature's resistance. If my poison was not strong enough to kill this thing then I'm beyond doomed. Still, I couldn't wipe that childish grin off my face. Even if I had to die here, I'll die fighting. I have become a cultivator, and all cultivators will one day meet with a crisis. This is my crisis and I have to survive it. The leopard moved forward, yet the moment it placed its foot on the ground it wobbled, then it began sneezing. The creature shook and shuddered as it retched red disgusting liquid out of its mouth, its hair began to fall and its eyes began tearing blood. The leopard shook, howled in pain, and suddenly fell to the side, motionless as more of the green smoke penetrated through it and ate away at its flesh. In seconds, the leopard husked over, his whole body drained from blood and muscle tissue as it transformed into nothing but brittle bones on skin. It took me a moment to fully take in what just happened. The poison breath I just used is surprisingly powerful, so powerful that it took down such a large predator in seconds. This poison cultivation is not a hack, it's the real deal. To be able to handle such a large predator with such a lowly cultivation level, I can only think of one thing. Up. I began giggling. I was funny, how far I had to suffer, and it was funny how things had turned, but the most hilarious was that I actually have value. And things could actually work out for me in the end. I smiled to myself as I picked up my spear and decided to continue heading deeper into the forest. I looked behind me where Lucid Springs was, then I scoffed, I'm not going back, so why look in that direction? Just as I was about to move, something shiny grabbed my interest. It was a red crystal that became visible after all of the leopard's skin had shrunken and tore. I went toward it and grabbed the crystal, but the moment I did, green energy began evaporating from the leopard's skin and surged toward the hand grabbing the crystal. The energy was domineering, tyrannical, and pervasive. It bore through my arm and continued doing as it pleases in my body. It felt painful, but a small part of me believed that this, whatever it was not harmful to my body. Suddenly I felt something snapping, then the world turned white. I woke up, later, hours at least, as there was sunray going through the thick foliage. The time was day, and I had no idea of the exact moment. The sun was a little beyond its zenith, so it must be half an hour in the afternoon. Looking around, there was nothing different from yesterday. The corpse of the leopard was still lying peacefully on the ground. Something happened yesterday, but I had no clue what. I got up. How did I get up? I thought. My leg was badly wounded, broken even, but now I'm fully standing up. I removed the robe that was covering my right leg and noticed that the bone that was protruding from it had already mended back to its proper place. Even more so, the pustules on my arm, the arm that I went to grab the crystal from within the tiger, had lessened. They no longer were as large as baseball balls. But now, they were the size of peas. Still, they were disgusting to look at. How did that happen? Could it be the crystal? I thought. I pulled out the small crystal, but it was the same as yesterday. No change had happened to it. If I remember correctly, a green overbearing energy had penetrated my hand right after I went for the crystal. Could it be related to the poison breath? It shouldn't be, right? Without anyone of expertise to ask, I decided to leave this matter to undertake later. There was no need for me to worry about things I cannot explain, especially with my low cultivation level, and the lack of knowledge on how this world works. All my life I wanted to become a cultivator, but I focused on that goal so much that I never thought about what to do when I become a cultivator. I don't know any of the monsters or demonic monsters that live in this world, I don't know the geography of this country, nor do I have any knowledge about the powers that rule this place. I need to set a goal for myself and then follow through with it. And my first goal is simple. I need to join a sect. As I walked forward, without any visible objective or clearer goal than becoming a member of a cultivation sect, I came to encounter several things on my journey. More monsters, not to say that it was as easy as before to deal with these new types. They were far smaller than the leopard and weaker. But their numbers were problematic. I ended up entering the territory of a lizard monarch or something of the sort, as there were hundreds of said critters moving around me. Black lizards with sharp claws hissed and skittered around me. None of them dared make a move, but at the same time, they surrounded me from all over, on the ground and tree branches. They seemed to be expecting something, perhaps a command to attack, as they have yet to show any hostility toward me, except when I tried to move. The closest of the lizard would hiss and only calm down when I stopped. Soon, a lizard, far bigger than any of the rest, and probably as big as a German mastiff, came toward me. Its skin was obsidian, dark as the night, and exuded a powerful presence among its peers. They all gave way to it as it walked. This must be the king or queen of these lizards, I believed. Once the larger of the reptiles came within an arm's reach, it slowly sniffed the air around me. Then it shook its head, it began coughing or sneezing, and this enough caused me to worry. If the same happens to it as did to the leopard and the lizard starts bleeding, the rest of its company will come for my throat. And I'll have to deal with their massive numbers. Hopefully, my poison breath is strong enough to take them down rapidly, or I'll probably be torn to pieces judging by how sharp the claws on them. Yet, the lizard hadn't sniffed enough poison chi for me to be fatal to it. It reared back, hissed a few notes, and the rest of its group slowly backed off and skittered off, disappearing among the thick forest foliage. The lizard king or queen, I'm not a biology graduate mind you, did the same soon as everyone had left. I sighed a breath of relief. There was no need to take a life if one didn't need to, and I had no use wasting another valuable poison breath for nothing. I continued my journey until I heard the sound of running water. There was a river nearby. I headed there to wash up. It has been a long time since I last took a bath, and the stench and sticky sludge I have on me had accompanied me for a long time now. Once I was on the riverbed, I removed my clothes and slowly dipped my battered and disgusting body in it. The cool water soon removed the oily sludge I had coating my body, and bit by bit, the stickiness lessened and I felt refreshed. Still, the pustules and tumorous bulges I had all over my body were a sight to behold. Disgust was the first thing anyone would think of, even me. Still, that was not bad on its own. First, looking like this will keep me out of trouble. No one wants to associate themselves with a creature such as myself, and second, there was a promise in the book that after reaching certain milestones, the pustules will disappear and I would probably regain my former appearance. That is, of course, if I reach these milestones. Ah, crap! I muttered as I noticed something. Fish, floating on the river, dead. The filth all over me, or probably my existence was poisonous enough that it killed off a lot of the fish in this river. And this probably contaminated it. I hope that no humans drink from this stuff right now. That would certainly end up killing them. I went back, but naked, to get my filthy clothes. Most of them were torn beyond repair, but these are all I had. And I didn't dare wear one of the cultivator's clothes, in fear that I might meet someone who will recognize the outfit. Simple, it was a risk not worth taking. I'm weak, not stupid. If I were to wear their clothes and one of their sect members meet me, how will I explain it? Or worse, what if I encounter a member of a hostile sect to these robes? A risk that was not worth taking for the comfort of fabric. I washed my clothes as best as I could, removing the sludge on them, and at least had them clean enough to be worn and not look like a low-class beggar. I looked like a beggar all right, but a clean beggar. Once they were dry, I gathered up my stuff and headed alongside the stream. There was no way for me to cross it, as there was no bridge and I didn't want to risk swimming across. And now that I think of it, I should have thought about that before dipping myself into the river. You never know if there is a cultivator crocodile version here in this river. Or worse. Later I managed to cross the river thanks to some protruding rocks I found making a small bridge. Still, without a clear destination to where to head to, I continued marching, 4 hours. Until the sun set and rose back again, days went by as I moved. Unhampered by hunger as I didn't feel the need to eat, unhampered by fatigue as I felt refreshed even after all that walking, and never even dropped a sweat. Old and battered as I may be, this still is better than when I was human. A cultivator's life is rather amazing. One day, as I was walking, I encountered something that changed my way of thinking. There was a small purple flower on the ground. It seemed to be the only living thing in the vicinity. Decayed corpses of snakes, bugs, and birds were sprawled all around the flower, yet this thing, brimming with life, and I felt it beckoning me. I walked up to the flower, making sure that there was no monster or demonic creature in the vicinity. I still remember from those stories that if this thing is a treasure, it would mean that it must have a guardian beast protecting it. But after straining my eyes for so long, there was nothing of the sort. I slowly approached the flower and went down to grab it. Just as my hands touched the stem, I felt as if someone was speaking through my mind. Burial purple-petaled flower. A poisonous flower that steals the longevity of the creatures that get too close to it. Once consumed, it will greatly enhance the innate ability of the poison breath. Asterisk. The heck? Who is there? I asked, but no one answered. I turned around to locate the person that talked, but there was no one. Could I have imagined it? But if so, would it be this detailed? I instinctively rubbed on my chest. There was the poison god's heritage, hidden behind the layers of my battered robes. Perhaps it's the book. That's the only logical explanation for this illogical scenario. It could be that the book has some knowledge about these flowers and plants. A thought to think about later. I took a mental note of what just happened and ripped the flower along with its roots. The best way to digest the burial purple-petaled flower is to make it into pills, but you are not an alchemist and in dire need of strength. Consume it whole. Though a lot of its medical value will be lost, you will still gain a greatly. Gain what? I asked back, but nothing answered. This book seemed to be sentient. Perhaps. The way it spoke was too specific. Perhaps it is not just stating a fact, it also commented on my current condition and how I'm unable to do this alchemy. Another thing to take note of, once I'm in a secluded place, I'll try and understand this book better. I drove the flower, roots, and all into my mouth and began crunching it. Scorching hot and at the same time icy liquid dripped down to my stomach. It was rather uncomfortable, but no way as near as to what the bone and body grinding poison did to me. This was rather refreshing in the sense, pain makes one feels alive. Or perhaps I have grown masochistic. Nevertheless, the benefits that this flower came with were rather surprising. One of the largest pustules on my right hand outright disappeared once I consumed the flower, and for the first time, I was able to see one small patch of my skin that was not contaminated with pustules or tumors. Good. Just as I was about to continue walking, I felt the meridians in my body vibrate. I immediately sat down and began cultivating. Rotating the newly consumed energy proved to be far easier than when I did with the bone and body grinding poison. It was simple and it was far faster and more comfortable. The energy rotated at a rapid pace and continued doing so until I felt a sudden release of energy. I broke through the peak of the lower chi condensation. I hastily checked the book for any new updates, but there was nothing there for me. No news about what to do next. So I sighed and continued cultivating. I needed to have my foundation stabilized. Gaining a new cultivation level is good, but without proper stabilizing of the foundation, it will prove a hindrance to one's future achievement. I read too many stories to know that once one breaks through, they have to meditate and cement their cultivation first. I closed my eyes for a while, slowly rotating the newfound energy to a new meridian that has just unlocked in my body. Now, the energy I could manipulate, even if it had increased by just one meridian, was at least a third more than before. Soon, I felt the world went out of focus, and I was immersed in cultivation. Never sensing when the world turned, and the sun had dipped. Over and over again, days had went by and I was still in my lotus position, diligently cultivating. I never sensed when monsters approached me, and hastily ran off when birds thought I was an immobile stone and perched on my head, only to fall to their deaths soon after. My whole body is poison. This state would have probably continued for a while more as I tried diligently to break through to the next level using the remaining energy of the burial purple-petaled flower, but I was rudely awakened when the earth began to wildly vibrate. I opened my eyes and realized that the vibrations were getting stronger, and they were headed my way. Suddenly 2 people showed up. they flew using 2 swords under their feet, and both of them looked badly wounded. One of them, a handsome man, probably not older than 20, had one of his arms flailing uselessly to his side, and a gruff-looking expression on his face. Vexed. His robes were sky-blue colored and were ripped in several places. He seemed to be indigent to what just occurred to him. The other was a girl, also probably of the same age, a young woman that even when dirt and scum had covered most of her robes and face, she exuded a beauty that no woman I have ever seen had. I was only able to see her for a few seconds, but it almost lasted a lifetime. Her eyes were bright, even in such a desperate situation she seemed to be defiant, her face had porcelain white skin, and the rest of her hourglass body only made one wish to greedily have this woman for themselves. I shook my head. Perhaps this was a cultivator's charm, or perhaps this is the difference between a mortal and an immortal. Cultivators had more means to gain beauty than normal mortals, and this one was, even if an unparalleled beauty, compared to many others she would look plain. Still, I had no business with these two. Miss Yen. Look, spoke the man, his eyes immediately changed to hostility. Let's use him as a distraction, he said, then threw something small and round at my feet. A pill. It immediately blew up and smoke came out of it. It stank. What are you doing? The girl shouted and stopped. The boy also stopped and shouted back, move, Miss Yen. We'll die at this rate, it's our best chance, let the Boar King waste time on this abomination, we're better off escaping. You're endangering the lives of others for your escape, that's not the way of our sect. Miss Yen, a genius such as yourself cannot die in this place. We have to leave now, we can amend our mistakes later, but surviving now is our top priority. I will not let an innocent man die for my sake. The woman shouted. What innocence? Don't you see what he is? Such abomination is the punishment of heaven, he must have been turned to such creature due to his evil deeds, this is heaven's way of using us to slay the wicked. Hey, you've been rambling your mouth for a while now, what's going on? And why'd you throw a stink bomb at me? Stink bomb? This commoner knows not even of the monster-luring pill. Miss Yen, let's go. There is no time to waste. Before the girl could even speak, the trees behind me parted, revealing a gigantic boar. The size of him was large enough that an elephant would barely make it to its knees. It had tusks as big as a boat's mast and its fur looked like it was made of rapiers instead of hair. The boar sniffed at the air and took note of me. Ah, shit. I cursed. I can't allow a man to die due to our carelessness, the girl said and put her weight on her sword. The sword flew toward me, but the boar was about to attack. There was no way for me to survive this hit. I immediately placed 2 fingers under my lips and spat out poison breath. Green smoke shot out from my mouth shaped like an arrow, then entered right through the boar's open mouth. The boar's attack halted mid-strike and the creature squealed like a pig in a slaughterhouse. The creature began jerking as I moved back and away from the enraged creature. It began bleeding from all of its orifices, then fell. Spasming, shaking, and shuddering. The boar died in less than a heartbeat, and with it came a sobering reality. I was powerful enough to survive a creature that caused such damage to these cultivators, but I knew that I was not strong enough to survive an attack from them. A single sword slash or even a projectile attack from any of them would mean my death. I needed not show my weakness here. Oh, it's dead already. Damn, and I even held back a little. I muttered under my breath, this was of course on purpose. Acting up all mysterious is the best way to make people wary of you. The kid, seeing this, immediately came to me. Stood in front of me and held both of his hands in greeting, even if one of them was broken, which was painful. He shook and shuddered as he bowed his head, saying, Senior. Junior apologizes for his misbehavior. Agu, no worries, I said as I shook my hand at his face. But really, what are 2 young kids like you doing here? I asked. I needed knowledge, and the best source of knowledge was a person in your debt. If Senior wishes to know, we are disciples of the Sword Spirit sect, the woman named Yen spoke. I'm Yen Song, daughter of Zhang Song, a great elder of the Spirit Sword sect. What about you? I asked the kid. I am Lu Zifeng, I'm an inner disciple of the Spirit Sword sect, and have come with Miss Yu for a mission of our sect. I suppose the mission was interrupted by this little pig. I spoke back. I didn't need to be a mind reader to know what the 2 were thinking right now as they looked at each other. Little pig. That dangerous monster is just a little pig for this man. Who is he? He must be some powerful figure. But his cultivation looks so weak. Still, we can't afford to mess with him. Also, he is a poison cultivator. We need to be wary or something of the sorts. Oh, good to know. Could I be so rude to ask who Senior is? Xifeng asked. Me. I'm just a small-time rogue cultivator, no need to worry about me. So what do you want with this little piggy? I further cemented my superiority with my words. Yes, we were tasked to retrieve a third-order demon core. Until this wild boar king showed up. The boar king, as you must know, is the fourth order, and we can't beat this with our weak core formation cultivation level. Huh, is that so? I replied and pulled out the core I obtained from the leopard. That's a third-order core, replied the kid. You want it? No. We can't take it, we have burdened Senior enough, replied the girl. Why yes, Miss Yen is correct, we would be rude. We'll try and find one ourselves. You're in no shape or form to beat a third order. Just take it, I said as I threw the core toward the kid. Now, if you could, leave, that would be. Yes, Senior, Junior will not forget your kindness. The kid then drew something out of a pouch he had on the side. It looked quite similar to the pouches those other cultivators had. It was a token. I frowned as I looked at the token. This was a countermeasure for something I hoped wouldn't be true. The kid immediately hesitated and said, I'm sorry, I pulled out the wrong token. He then handed me another one, quite similar to the first, bowed and said, please, whenever you visit our sect, just show this to anyone and I'll be informed of your presence. A guest. Yes, an honored guest at our sect, the kid said and stood up. Thank you, Senior, for your benevolence, the girl said, and the two of them took to the skies. Well, that went well. I said as I hid the token under my clothes. I needed a way to open those pouches I got from those cultivators at the Poison God's cave. I sighed and headed to the boar's carcass. There was green energy slowly eating away at the remains of the boar, and if it is the same as what happened to the leopard, I'm sure I'll be able to consume it and heal a little bit. What happened there? Yen asked. I have no idea, I'm still trying to figure it out, replied Xifeng. That man clearly looked far weaker than us, and he said we were disturbing his cultivation. What a lame excuse. You're right, this place is barren of spiritual chi, what could he be doing there? She asked again. I don't know, he looked like he was in chi condensation level. But to survive in this forest and especially at the rims of the Demon Mountain, one would need to be at least at the upper levels of core formation or lesser nascent soul level. How is he managing if he had such a low cultivation level? I don't know, but didn't our master say that there are always higher mountain and steeper seas? He could be an old monster, you know. True, the way he spoke, how eccentric he was, and how carefree he looked in such a dire and dangerous situation suggests that he is an old monster. But we have no proof of it. Why did you change the token? She asked. At first, I was cautious, I thought he could be just a sheep wearing a tiger's skin. But it appears that it was the opposite. You mean the way he gazed at you? Yes, at first, I wanted to give him a token with a tracker, so I could monitor his whereabouts, but the way he looked at me gave me the creeps. I felt like if I were to hand it to him, I would insult him and nothing good comes out of that when dealing with mysterious people. There was a good chance that he was faking it too, but yeah, on the off chance he is not, and especially of how he handled that boar, thankfully we didn't cross him. Yes, this is a sobering experience, Miss Yen. I'll take note of it, Brother Xifeng. The girl replied and the two disappeared in the distance. Asterisk. Okay, that worked out perfectly, I thought to myself as I flipped the token that the kid Xifeng gave me like a coin. This should come in handy later, but for now, it's best I don't use it unless I need to. I moved to the boar king's carcass and placed my hand on it. Once again there was that green energy coursing around the carcass of the boar. It came rushing through my arm, climbing and penetrating deep within the skin. It bore through and made its way to my meridians, then the energy began spiraling in controlled spins, aiding my cultivation. Some of the soreness of my body disappeared. The pain on my leg had completely dispersed. And now I was able to walk with utter ease. My back no longer pained me, and for the first time in 80 years, I was able to walk in a straight manner. Old age gave me a slightly hunched back, but now it was gone. Still, the disgusting tumors and pustules on my body were still on, and to get rid of them I'll need to harvest more of this green energy. I continued walking randomly, as I thought about my next course of action. I can't join a sect right now even if I miraculously find a way to do so. Simply because I am not strong enough nor weak enough. An old man such as myself would be a strange presence in a sect, especially with my low cultivation level. Yet, if I don't join one, I will be unable to understand how this world of cultivation fully works. I'll need a method to join a sect and not draw great attention to myself. Secondly, I needed to open those bags, desperately. There could be great treasures there that could help boost my cultivation level or martial currency that could be exchanged for items and pills. Poison pills, that is. So, first things first, I needed to increase my cultivation level enough to be able to open the pouches. And to do that, I need to find more resources, plants, bugs, or poisons. Which I'm more than certain that I will find in abundance once I go deeper into this forest. Coupled with the aid of the book's internal knowledge of materials and flora, I could understand and know the value of such plants, and even if I had no prior knowledge of them. I continued traveling. The need for sleep and food was a great bonus, as I didn't have to think about sustaining myself. The poison energy within me was enough to satiate me for an extremely long period. Days of travel went by, and in them, I gained a good harvest. I encountered a couple more leopards and another boar king. They were easy to deal with, as long as they underestimated me, thinking of me as weak prey. I could easily spew out a poison breath on them and they would die. I harvested the cores and the green energy, which reduced a bit of the swelling on my body, but not completely. If I had 100 pustules, I had currently lost a couple. I still had a long way to get rid of all of these disgusting things off my skin. One day, as I randomly walked without any goal or objective in mind but to gain better strength, I managed to exit the forest, or so I thought. Right in front of me was a mountain so high that its peak was covered in clouds. And around its base was a clearing that appeared to be separating the forest from the mountain. My whole body was urging me to leave this area, but a light soothing feeling came from the book inside my chest, comforting me and encouraging me to keep moving. The poison god's manual was telling me that it needed me to go forward. I disregarded the urge to leave and against my better judgment moved toward the mountain. Danger and opportunity always walked hand in hand. If there is danger here, then there would definitely be a reward. I steeled my resolve and walked up the mountain. The steepness of this mountain made it troublesome to climb, especially with this old battered body of mine. I had to change direction several times before I found a path that I could walk up without fearing the fall to my death. The climb took me days, and thankfully there were no creatures or demonic beasts that threatened my life as I made my way up the mountain. My only issue was the coldness of the mountain that increased the further I went up, and the dangerous looming sense of death that increased with every step. It felt like a suffocating pressure that was pressing against me, urging me to go down, but the more I kept going up, the more I felt that I needed to be up there. At one point the pressure became too much that I lost my grip and almost fell to my death, yet with a desperate flail of my hand, I managed to grab onto a small ledge and pulled my battered body up. I rested for a few hours, rotated some of the energy within me, and then continued climbing. 2 days later of the constant climb, I managed to reach the source of the danger. A cave entrance that looked like it was punched in by a giant. Bone-piercing cold threatened to turn me into an ice sculpture. Something from within the cave was sending chilling energy that coursed my body and made my old bones rattle. If I were to move forward, I was certain I would turn into an iced corpse. I sat down and began rotating my cultivation base. The poison energy that spiraled within me and through my meridians began fighting against the cold. It was a strange sensation, as if I had grown a tolerable fever that heated my body enough to withstand the cold. I stood up and took several more steps. The cold was still painful, but it was much more tolerable. But the further I went, the harder it became. Even breathing turned suffocating, as I coughed up blood. Ice had definitely materialized in my lungs and caused some internal damage. I walked back and sat down, rotating the energy a few times more until my condition stabilized. Spiraling the poison chi helped me in gaining heat, but once I stood up and stopped cultivating, that heat soon dissipated against the cold. The only way for me to move forward was obvious. I needed to maintain a cultivation status while moving. A feat quite difficult, but it was the only option I had if I wanted to investigate the source of this cave's coldness and the beckoning of the book. I stood up and entered a cultivation state. Slowly my body heated up, and then I took the first step. I immediately lost focus and my cultivation stopped. I desperately tried again, and again, and again. Several hours went by with minimal progress. Rotating the poison chi within me while walking took a great deal of concentration, but with hard work and dumb stubbornness, I was able to move 10 steps while I still rotated my energy. If I continued like this, I was bound to achieve a breakthrough as my energy seemed on the verge of reaching the medium-lower level of chi condensation. And only 5 steps more I did it, and the energy that my body released was enough to cause steam to burst out of my body. Reaching the medium-lower level of chi condensation caused my body to shudder, and a new page of the Poison God's Heritage book was unlocked. You have continued your journey and reached middle-lower chi condensation, to which I congratulate you, my disciple. But do not gain a shred of pride or arrogance, because for your current self you're nothing but a speck of dust in an endless sea of sand. You have just begun your journey and I shall be your mentor. In the middle-lower chi condensation, your poison chi will be able to course more meridians, and thus, giving you more power and a better physique. The ability to use the poison breath will be increased and you'll find yourself feeling less exhausted with every use. Here is a diagram on how to circulate the poison energy into the newly unlocked meridians. A small diagram of a man circulating the energy, quite vivid and lifelike, manifested on the book. The man was sat in the lotus position and began moving the energy through different pressure points on his body. 3 more meridians were added to the former 5 I had already unlocked, making them 8. This would increase my power several times. Because the increase of meridians is not additive, but more like with each new meridian unlocked, the base energy I could manipulate and control would multiply. I sat down in the lotus position and rotated my poison chi in the same manner that the pictures depicted. And soon, I became aware of a newfound level of power that coursed through my meridians. Another page opened up, unveiling a new spell. The picture in the book showed a man standing in a martial stance, one hand held vertically in front of him, and the other tucked under his armpit, like a punch in wait for a release. The man then took a forward step, and the arm under his armpit extended forward into a forward grab, the fingers opened up, then they clawed at the air. The course of the meridians required to do such a move was simple, but it also required the usage of all of the newly unlocked meridians. I was highly tempted to try out this new move, which is named Poison Tiger Claw. But there was a great deterrent. I was no longer in the jungle where I could resupply my inner reserves of poison chi by eating random bugs and poisonous plants. I was in an ice-cold cave in a high and steep mountain. A single use of any martial spell will cost me poison chi that I do not want to be wasted right now, especially when this place is reeking of danger. I gripped my fist tight, shaking away the ecstatic feeling of a new spell, and focused on my current goal. One has to be smart about what they do, and this doesn't only account for a cultivation world. Taking idiotic risks is nothing short of suicidal. Even if this journey itself is an idiotic risk, it promises benefits, but using a spell just for the sake of seeing how it performs, while under my circumstances and without any tools or means to supplement the poison chi I will be using, then wouldn't that be even more idiotic? I began circulating the energy through my newly unlocked meridians and had managed to discover an amazing new fact. The rotation of the poison chi within the meridians became faster than before, and the energy it released doubled up and continued rising. The cold temperature felt less and less dangerous and began to graze upon the limits of discomfort. If I continued rotating the energy this way, I would only feel a slight annoyance from the cold instead of the bone-rattling feeling I had before. With this newfound strength, I continued my exploration within the cave. If this was a regular cave, the time I would take to get to the depths of it would undoubtedly be less than an hour, but it took me hours to get to the deepest part of the cave. Mainly because of the cold, it rose on occasions, and even after rotating my cultivation forcefully to help myself from falling prey to the bone-biting cold, I barely managed to survive thanks to the time lapse of the cold increases. It only spiked after every 10 to 20 minutes and lasted for at most 10 seconds. But with every step, the coldness that would occasionally increase would become harder to bear. At the end of the cave was a wide room that you could fit a couple of basketball courts with ease in. Its walls were made of ice, crystal clear ice that was reflecting the scarce source of light that came from the cave's entrance. That tiny source of light, reflected enough against this crystal clear surface, gave me a clear view of what was happening, and the source of this cold temperature. It was a monster's breath. Yes, a monster so huge that I found it amazing how it managed to fit itself into the cave entrance. It must have come in here when it was a baby and now it had grown into such a large creature. Yet how did it get its food? I failed to understand the base behind how this world works, but I didn't bother thinking about it for now. I doubted that it would be like a cultivator, not needing mortal food, but rather the rich worldly energy. Back to the monster, as I looked at it, it was nothing but a big ball of slowly inflating and deflating white fur. It had 2 massive arms and legs, resembled a humanoid figure frighteningly, and its face was that of an ape. Yes, this was, for the lack of the proper term that the cultivators would use on this monster, a yeti. I took a big gulp. There was no way in hell or heaven if I was going to survive if this bugger wakes up. I turned to walk away. There was nothing here to gain, and only death would await me if I were to accidentally wake this behemoth. Yet, from the reflection on one of the room's walls, I saw a glistening source of dim light. Something was reflecting a tiny bit of light somewhere around the room. I turned to check again and noticed that the yeti had his arm wrapped around something. It was a rose, a white and sky blue colored rose. The stem of it was made of a crystal clear substance that looked like ice. And its petals were distinct and apart from each other, making it one of the most beautiful roses I have ever seen. The book in my chest vibrated. Then that old ancient voice sounded in my mind explaining to me what I was seeing. Origin in flower. A flower that is condensed and created from the concentration of purest forms of yin energy. It is said that consuming this flower will give the user unparalleled talent in the way of yin. It is best used by female cultivators. Still, yin can also be harnessed by male cultivators if they wish to pursue the demonic or devil cultivation paths. Another sentence was also suddenly spoken through my mind. My heritage is considered a wrongful path. In the way of other cultivators, poison is insidious and highly frowned upon. It is a demonic cultivation path that scratches the rims of the devil path. Still, in the world of cultivation, basing your decisions on rightful and wrongful will put your martial heart to the test. One must not bend their knees to those above him in submission but rather rise above, struggle, and strive to feel pleased about yourself. Disciple of mine, you may be the vilest of the people or the most benevolent, it all depends on how you see the world, but no matter if you are a saint or a devil incarnate, it shall crack against the will of the heaven if you are not pleased with yourself. Do what you want to do, challenge who you wish to challenge, and break who wishes to break you. Be overbearing, be proud, and most of all, never cower. For even if poison is the path of the cowardly as these insignificant and utterly delusional cultivators believe it to be, it means nothing if you make your own fate with your own hands. Disciple of mine, take every discussion shown in your life only if you feel pleased about it. Never bow down to anyone, and always let your back be as straight as an arrow. Even against the judgment of the world, if you feel that you are doing the right thing, even if the right thing in the eyes of the world is wrong, then do it, and do it while being proud. Cultivation is not just about the body and soul, but also your spirit. Even if your body looks like that of a disgusting creature that has been scooped from the yellow river of the underworld, your spirit, if never contaminated, could blossom into the most divine of beings. Disciple of mine, be courageous, not reckless, be proud, not prideful, and be honest with yourself no matter the situation. If you see a wrong, then change it with your own hands. Never let yourself regret anything, and live your life, seeking to better it, and seeking to achieve your goals. Disciple of mine, these words I impart upon you are words that I wish I would have received when I first began my journey. If you honestly work by them, you shall witness great improvement in your cultivation, and at the same time, you shall see the world in a different light. After listening to that sermon, I was honestly feeling touched. The words of this speaker resounded through my soul. I felt that my cultivation rose a bit just by listening to them. And thus, I smiled. Whoever made this book is one of the wisest of the people I have ever known. I looked at the flower once again. There was a risk to taking it, and it involved doing something stupid. But if it is risky and there was a reward to be had, then backing off was not an option. This is what the book master had written: never feel regret for things you feel deserve your attention. And this rose right here is a prime example. I crouched down, though I had no idea why I did that. It's not like if I crouch the monster will sense me less. Still, it felt like the right thing to do in such a situation. I continued crouch walking forward until I was next to the monster. Right as when he decided to breathe out. The extremely cold temperature dropped like an anvil being thrown in a deep ocean. Thankfully the foci of the breath were not directly on me. I was a few steps away from it, and this with the fanatic circulation of the poison chi within me helped me tide through the icy cold breath of this yeti. I took a big sigh of relief when the temperature rose back to tolerable levels, then moved around the yeti's arm. There, the rose sparkled in a glistening light as if it was its light bulb. I wrapped my hand around its stem, and immediately I felt as if my hand had turned to a block of ice. I rapidly pulled the rose and felt a sudden chill running down my spine. The cave's temperature began increasing. It seems that the rose was the reason why this cave was this cold in the first place, and it appeared that this sleeping giant yeti was cultivating by absorbing the coldness of the rose. Of course, is a theory of mine, as I still have no real grasp of how the cultivation world works, but it seemed to be the most plausible cause. I walked back and away from the monster. There was no need for me to wait around here. And soon, the yeti began twitching. It was about to wake up. I increased my paces and managed to reach the cave's entrance. Only then did the yeti's eyes fully opened up. My 80-years-old brain cells began pumping some juice, deducing the situation. Shit was about to go down. I'm old, not fast, and hella slow. If the yeti realizes that I took his rose, he will come after me and I will not survive. The second thing, the cave exit is smaller than the yeti, so it will be physically impossible for him to catch me. Yet, this is a cultivation world and the yeti could have the strength of a Superman for all I know. Meaning that this obstacle might be useless in stopping him if he could tear it apart. Lastly, the ice yeti breath was almost enough to turn me into an ice sculpture, so there could be a pretty good chance he has an assault-type ability that could turn me to ice if he used it on me. And in that long straight-lined cave, a single breath will turn me into a popsicle before I could reach the exit. Several cumbersome variables are working against me, so I needed a way to save my skin. I immediately spat out my poison breath into the yeti's room, and as he was waking up, he breathed in a huge gulp of it. This was good. I then immediately began running away, or what any other healthier person would call, walking rapidly. Come on, I'm old. A loud growl echoed from behind me. The yeti had fully woken up, but it would take a few seconds to realize what should have happened, so I'm good so far. Another roar came in and the ear-ringing sound of stone being turned to dust echoed from behind me. The yeti had realized that I took the rose and knows where I am. I spat another poison breath behind me and continued walking forward. The exit to the cave was still far away and the yeti will have a couple of surprises waiting for him soon. As I remembered from before, it took me several hours to get into the yeti's room, and I had to slow down and cultivate. Otherwise, it would have taken me less than an hour to make the trip. That is if I was slowly walking, and at my current speed, at least a quarter of an hour is all I needed to leave the area. And thanks to the reduced coldness from the rose in my hand, it would be easier than before. Yet the looming danger of the yeti behind me still weighed heavily on my shoulders. It seemed that the rocks were not strong enough to fully stop this creature from coming after me, and they proved to be a minor annoyance to this beast. Suddenly I turned and saw the ape-faced yet looking at me with murder in his eyes. It opened its mouth wide, revealing a sharp row of fangs. I ran forward as fast as my body could, but a gust coming from outside was preventing me to increase my distance. A second later I realized that this was no gust, but the ape was trying to breathe in the air either to suck me in or to prepare for an attack. The poison breath I left in the path had already been fully sucked in, but since I had nothing to lose, I spat another poison breath in front of me that was instantly sucked in by the yeti. The pulling force stopped and I was jerked forward. I didn't dare turn around. I had no time to waste doing so. I struggled to move forward and then it came to a cold icy gust of wind that was going to spill my doom. The yeti seemed unaffected by my poison and is retaliating. And I had no way to survive this beast's assault. My body slowly began to freeze over, yet somehow I didn't feel pain. Then soon the breath stopped, while a loud wrenching sound echoed from behind me. More disgusted vomiting came following, then a moaning mixed in with the pained squeal of a pig being slaughtered. My body was encased in ice, green-colored ice, that soon began to melt. Mixing ice and my poison breath seemed to be nullifying the ice's properties. And at the same time, the rose in my hand began to absorb the liquidized green poison. The white petals of the rose began changing in color and turned to a poisonous pale green color. The ice soon melted off of me and was fully consumed by the rose. I regained the ability to move my body and turned to witness the corpse of the yeti. His face had fully melted off, leaving bare bone upon half-melted skin on its face. The fur on its body had fallen to the ground, leaving a disgusting shape of skin with rare patches of fur on top. The body looked like those cats, the Sphinx cat, that had no fur, and even that bare skin had already melted in several places. Damn, that was close, I thought to myself. This time, I got lucky, and luck is not a good thing. Even if it had saved my life, it showed me that I was not capable of saving my own life by my means. Even if it was by my own hands that I have killed the Yeti, if it was not for the rose, the ice would have covered me and turned me into an ice statue. I sat down in the lotus position and circulated the scarce poison chi I had in me. The continuous use of poison breath and the continued rotation of the poison chi to prevent the cold had dried my reserves. Yet, I had no way to increase my poison chi except for the rose. The book had mentioned that it is best consumed by a female, yet dark path cultivators, such as demonic cultivators or devil cultivators, also use yin. It would supplement me greatly if I were to consume it. I pulled out one of the rose petals and placed it in my mouth. On the first chew, cold comforting energy rushed down my stomach and began rotating along with the poison qi I had in me. It felt soothing and bearable. Yet I noticed that the rose began to wither from the stem. The moment I removed that petal. If this continues, the rose will wither and I will lose a great treasure. So, against my better judgment, I shoved the rest of the petals into my mouth, stem, and roots and began chewing. A juicy liquid filled my mouth. Honestly, this felt like ice cream. That of course lasted for only a few seconds as my mouth began to dry and the liquid began to force its way into my stomach, then into my meridians. The yin chi in the flower began fighting against the poison chi in my body, which was weaker than the origin yin flower. My meridians began to freeze over, and since I had too few of them unlocked by now, the origin yin flower was going to destroy them at this rate. I got back to the Yeti. I may have been hasty in shoving the origin yin flower in my mouth, but I didn't do it without a prior assessment of the dangers. The Yeti's body was covered with that green energy, the same that every monster I kill using poison breath has. And from the thickness of it, it was by far the thickest I have ever seen. Not even the boar kings I killed combined could match even a fraction of this energy. I placed my hand on the Yeti's rotten face, and the green energy coursed through it and began to fight off the yin origin flower's energy. The two energies began a battle, and the battleground was my old battered body. Not the most pleasant experience, I tell you. I jerked and spasmed, writhing on the ground like a snake that has been impaled with a sharp spear. My lungs were emptied as if I was struck with a sledgehammer in the ground. I didn't even have the energy or breath to scream the pain I was feeling. Some of the pustules on me burst out from the exertion, causing even more pain, which I could express due to the lack of breath. The veins on my body popped out, changing from frozen to hot, searing and green, infested with poison. The two energies fought off for what seemed to be an eternity. And in rare chances did I have the energy to take a breath that was emptied immediately by a follow-up wave of pain. The soul of me felt like it was about to leave my body, but the stubbornness of it was fighting against the invading force, pinning me and anchoring me back to this world in tormenting agony. Finally, the pain faded off and I was able to breathe anew. Still, I was in no way or shape capable of moving a single finger, so I just laid on the ground, exhausted, until I closed my eyes. Today's chapter is thanks to Andrew Aarons's generous donation. I decided to post a chapter for every new patron that joins the community. This will both encourage new patrons and at the same time encourage me to write more and the community to have more chapters. Several hours later, when the dim moonlight was all that shone from the cave entrance woke me up, a cool breeze, far warmer than the cave's earlier temperature, rose me from my unconsciousness. I got up, surprisingly agilely for my age. The old bones on me didn't rattle as much as they used to. And the random and awkward soreness had disappeared. The pustules on me had softened up. They didn't disappear though, but they became less apparent. I combed my hand over my head, and there were traces of hair there. That shouldn't be possible. The poison pool had melted all of my hair off, but now I have some of it back. The green energy of the Yeti's corpse revitalized my old self and gave me a new lease on life. Within me was newfound energy coursing along with the poison chi. They became harmonious and aided each other as they circulated the newly unlocked meridians. I achieved a medium middle layer of chi condensation while I was asleep. Sadly, due to my lack of focus, I must have lost a great deal of that power, so if I was cultivating that energy instead of being unconscious, I could have achieved the peak middle layer of chi condensation. Nevertheless, all progress is good, small or little. I moved away from the cave that I had nothing to do with anymore after picking up the Yeti's demonic core, which was purple instead of crimson red. Then I had to climb down the mountain, which was much faster and easier than climbing it. I did not need to find my way back to anything because I had no place to be right now, so my only goal right now was to randomly walk the forest and see where it will take me. I roamed about and continued walking, indefinitely and unknowing of my destination. The journey took me several days before I encountered the first people, and they were not a fun company. 5 men showed up in front of me, weapons drawn, and they had murder in their eyes. "Old man, state your name and what are you doing here?" "This is the territory of our Purple Cloud sect," the first of the bunch addressed me. He was a tall man with a long beard that reached up to his chest. His clothes were purple, probably in relation to their sect's name. The group behind him wore the same outfit, only theirs had a far lighter color tone. "My name is Shen Bao. I mean no trouble to your sect. I'm lost here and was trying to find my way out." "Lies. How could you survive this place if you were merely lost? Also, you're barely at chi condensation middle layer." "I guess I was lucky," I replied. "Luck? Nonsense. We have reports of people from the Sword Spirit Mountain coming here and causing trouble." "Oh, that must be the 2 guys I met earlier." "I have no relation to this Sword Spirit Mountain you're talking about." "Then you have no problem with us searching you," the man said as he pointed his sword at me. I took a deep breath. If I were to be searched by these men, they will discover the token that Kid had given me, and honestly, that's the least of my worries. I also have several demonic cores that will raise questions if they find them. Not to mention the book. Fighting was out of the question. I'm not capable of beating these 5. And running, that's not even an option. Suddenly I felt energy suppressing me and pinning me where I stood. One of the men came to me. He had a disgusted look at me when he saw my body, but he still did as needed and patted me like a cop would frisk a suspect. "He has nothing on him, elder brother." "Really? Check again. No man can travel this forest without at least some food or tools to defend themselves." The man did as he was told, and even got more aggressive with the patting. Surprisingly, for him and me, he didn't find anything. This was both a blessing and something to worry about. Where were all the items I harvested? The demon cores and the pouches from the cultivators and the book. Questions to be answered later. For now, the cultivator removed the pressure and allowed me to speak. "Many thanks, fellow cultivator. And to answer your questions, I've already lost my traveling bag a while ago when I was being hunted by a terrifying leopard." "Terrifying leopard? You're talking about the silver claw demon beast?" "Well, probably, but I didn't wait around to check the color of his claws. The moment I saw it, I dipped into a small hole and hid there for days. He tore my bag and got all my food. Then I moved about for a long time trying to get by. I got to eat some mushrooms along the way, to fight off the hunger." "Then your current appearance," the man said. "Definitely one of the things I ate. I wasn't like this when I first entered the forest," I replied. Which was true, by the way. The men looked awkwardly at each other for a few moments before the bearded leader said, "Then you'll come with us. We'll need to ask you a few more questions back at our sect." I took another gulp. This was both good and bad. After all, in those novels I've read, when someone says this exact sentence it usually means torture. But I'm in dire need to enter a sect and know more about this world. "Right, I'm more than willing to go with you, but I'll have to trouble you, sirs. I'm old and have no means to move. A few of you have swords that you could fly on, and my weak cultivation level is not enough to allow me to accompany you. Wouldn't it be troublesome for you to keep pace just for my sake?" "No need to worry about that, Duan Lin. Pick him up," the man with the beard said, and the young man who had patted me before came next to me, and pulled out a massive sword from his pouch. "Stand on it," he said. And just as I did, the sword rose, and with me above it, it was surprisingly easy to balance myself on it, which was probably thanks to Duan Lin controlling the sword effectively to help me stand without falling. "Let's go," the bearded man said, and the group flew forward, me alongside them. The journey continued for several hours, lasting almost an entire day from the fall of the sun to its rise in the next morning and long afternoon. This made me wonder. The group claimed that the forest I was in was their property, so for such a large forest, and for such a long journey we crossed, the Purple Cloud sect is definitely a big one. Also, I am part thankful for the arrival of this group of people. They were not bad people, at least from what I saw. They handed me food and continuously asked if I was exhausted or tired so they could take a rest. If this is how they treat prisoners, then I had a good chance of seeing some fairness in their judgment. Soon, Duan Lin, the man that was controlling the sword I was on, spoke. We arrived. Looking ahead, I saw a great torii gate in the distance with the words, Purple Cloud Sect. And behind it was what seemed to be a garden that extended far beyond what the eye could see, and even farther ahead were several mountains making the sect's inner setup. This Cloud Sect is looking promising. The group landed at the gate's entrance, and soon came a horse carriage, Only the horse had 6 legs instead of 4 and the carriage seemed to be floating instead of having wheels. There was Northwest one to drive the horse, so it seemed to be able to know what it was doing. "Get on, Shen," Duan Lin said. He opened the carriage's door and sat down. There was place for only 2 people and I was the second. I sat in front of him in the well-decorated, and definitely much more comfortable carriage than the sword. "What about the others?" I asked. "Don't worry, they will go first and report the matter to a sect elder, then will arrive once the elder is ready to receive you." "Right, that would do well," I replied and relaxed myself. The carriage began moving along the garden. Plants and flowers, so many of them were there. Most I saw in lucid spring, but there were other flowers and exotic roses and plants that I never saw before in my life, this one or the last one. The smell was wonderful, and it gave my old self a soothing sense of security and calmness. "I could live here for the rest of my life," I said. "Oh, why so?" asked Duan Lin. "Well, this smell, this serenity, I admire it. I should have made a garden such as this myself." "Well, I guess it's too late for that. You speak as if you used to be someone important, especially since seeing your lack of fear in the presence of foreign and stronger forces. Son, I've lived long enough to know when someone wants me harm, and I see that you and your sect are decent and wise people. Also, I used to be a city head before I touched upon the surface of cultivation. But it appears that I have done so when I became too old." A mortal city head that became a cultivator. Still, I doubt that the way of cultivation is limited by age. Though starting young is the best due to the momentum, aspiration, and hope of youth, starting late is not so bad. Wisdom is also a good factor in cultivation. "Thank you for your encouraging words, you sound pretty wise yourself despite your age." "How old do you think I am?" asked Duan Lin. I took a scrutinizing look at him and said, "Not a day over 20. Duan Lin laughed and said, "Thank you, but I'm 85 years old." "Holy hell. I'm younger than you then." "Well, technically you are, that's why it felt awkward when you called me son." I laughed at how carefree this man was. Though he looked hella young, his appearance was deceiving. Well, it doesn't matter. The real ordeal will start soon. And as I have predicted, the carriage stopped. We had already climbed one of the mountains while we were speaking and I didn't notice it one bit. The carriage worked against the inclination of the mountain and for some reason, the pull of the horse never wavered or changed. It felt like we were moving in a straight line at a steady speed. This is an amazing application of force and gravity. I need to study this further. I shook my head. My engineer self was resurfacing. This was not the time or place. "Let's get down, the elder is waiting for us," Duan Lin said. I nodded and left the carriage after him. Once I was down, I noticed a huge amount of kids, children even, young of age, between 14 to 18 approximately, all doing various chores and tasks. A group on my right was training all together following the movement of a man who seemed to be doing martial arts. Another batch of kids was hurrying, carrying logs that easily weighed several dozen times their weight as if they were made of plastic foam. And the latter group of kids was either sweeping the dirt with steel brooms that looked to be as heavy as MT due to the difficulty of every sweep, or cleaning the magnificent and gigantic palace in front of me from dirt and scum. There were dozens of kids running around all doing a different chore, and none of them were loitering or being too lazy. This place was the place of hard work. In front of us, at the entrance of this palace that was designed like a Chinese castle from the Forbidden City, there was a long red carpet and a chair where an old man with a white beard reached his stomach and a bald head. Even his eyebrows were quite bushy and long reaching to his cheeks. "Duan Lin, is this the suspect?" "Junior greets elder," Duan Lin said as he cupped his fists. "That's the second time I saw this practice. The first time was when a kid from the Sword Mountain did that to me, thinking I was stronger than him." "Greetings," I said as I cupped my fists at the men. "That's a dry welcome," the old man replied. "Yes, master, but I'm not from your sect, and it would be rude to call myself your junior in this case." "Good, at least you have a brain on that head of yours. So tell me, what were you doing in our backyard forest?" "First of all of that forest is your backyard." "Damn. That's a huge flex." "I have no knowledge of what flex is, but from your reaction it must be something good," the old man said as he twirled his beard. "Yeah, really good. I'm impressed, this sect must be amazing." The old man laughed and said, "Your knowledge of a cultivation world is really low. To be honest, we are one of the weakest sects in the Zhou country. Zhou country. Aren't we in Longxian County? Oh, you have really low knowledge, but it is understandable if you were a mortal. The Longxian County is a small part of the Zhou country, it is the smallest part even. And we're the sect controlling it and the county next to it, Long Yu. Right, thank you for your teaching, I said as I cupped my fists again at the men. Now, we are at a slight impasse here. The old man said, and his humorous expression changed to that of a more serious-toned one. A couple of spies have entered my backyard and took something from it. I wish to know if you have any knowledge of it. Now, this is difficult, if I were to answer wrongly, it will be my head that will roll. Now I could easily deny what he said, but there is always a chance of someone seeing me with those two from before, or even worse, if they were captured and admitted seeing me, which I wouldn't be too difficult to describe, an old man with ugly tumors all over his body, easiest lineup recognition of all times. No sir, I have explained to the others before, excuse my lack of knowledge because I can't address them as brothers due to my incompetence in the martial arts and cultivation world as it would shame them. But I have not seen anyone in the forest, and have survived there due to sheer dumb luck. Well, I already know that, but we need to make sure. Duan Lin, call the punishment hall elder. The old man said. Yes, elder. I had an anxious expression on my face when I heard the name, punishment hall. You seem rather anxious, said the elder. Well, of course, you just called me a liar and asked the punishment hall elder to come here, I'm gonna get beaten if not killed. Then admit that you at least know the ones who stole from us. Sir, with all due respect, on the off chance I saw them, which I didn't. Would you spare me if I said I did? I asked. The elder looked a little bit perplexed and said, No, I'll definitely execute you. Then why would I even say I did see them? So you die with your body intact. Sir, look at this, I said as I removed my sleeves and made the elder take a good look at me. Do you think I'll care enough if my body is left intact after I die? You make a good point. I walked down the stairs and toward the lower building areas of the mountain. The hall elder Hu Tian said that I'll find a deacon here to help me settle and start cultivating and doing some tasks for the sect. That will come in handy. Once I was at the bottom of the staired mountain, which took a great deal of time, I found myself standing next to various and numerous tightly packed houses of students and disciples of the Purple Cloud sect. One of the people moving about had a different set of clothes on him. When everyone was wearing light purple-colored robes, the men wore a dark set of robes, like a priest of the Middle Ages. He had a decorated fan in his hand that he constantly opened and closed as he watched over the people. Once his eyes landed on me, the brows above them furrowed, then he snapped his fan shut in an audible click, he tucked both his arms behind him and walked toward me. His expression turning from serious annoyance to mild disgust the closer he got to me. He saw the tumors. He stopped a couple of steps in front of me and said, What is the meaning of these clothes? State your name. I'm Shen Bao, and I have just been admitted to the sect. As for my clothes, I don't have anything else to wear. Elder Hu Tian said that I'll need to find a deacon and present them with this. I said as I showed him the token. Humph, a new disciple. All right, I'm Deacon Situjan, but you're too old. Still, it's the elder's orders, follow me. And don't get too close, you stink and I fear that you could contaminate me with whatever abomination had plagued you. Yes, I'll keep my distance, I replied and walked behind the deacon. We walked for half an hour until we arrived at a building that towered over all of the buildings in the lodging area. Wait for me here, he said and walked inside. The building had a tower that had 4 stories and a large lower floor. Disciples walked in and out of the building and they all seemed to have a book in their hands. I managed to get a glimpse of the book's title and it read Purple Cloud Movement Technique. This is probably where I need to get my book. Soon afterward, the deacon came out. He had a set of clothes in one hand and a small pouch in the other. This is your disciple attire, it will change according to your cultivation level and status in the sect. For now, it's the palest of the purple color, meaning that you're an outer disciple. Which is not something to brag about. Thank you for your patronage, I replied. Don't thank me yet, this pouch has a few pills. They chi condensation pills, you'll get 3 each month. Use them sparingly. And there is a list of the chores you're required to do as an outer disciple. Do them all and you'll receive an extra pill by the end of the month, do less than required and a pill will be deducted for every chore missed. Thank you, Also, I was asked to get a purple cloud movement technique from the skill pavilion. A glint of greed flashed in the deacon's eyes once I spoke the words. Do you have the required token? Why, yes. Hand it over, and I'll see what I can do. Now there were two options. I could refuse, and probably end up in a bad situation with this deacon, or accept and see what is going to happen. After all, I don't need this skill, I already have the Poison God's book. Oh, wait, there is another issue I need to fix. I have no idea where the book went. I gave the deacon the token that Elder Hu Tian gave me, and he immediately tucked it under his robes, with enough speed that no one noticed what happened. It seems that he didn't want people to know that he took it from me. This is something I'll need to verify later. Here you go, now beat it, the deacon said. You haven't given me my lodging. Right, you're to head to the Cultivation Cave 3004. Thank you, I said and picked up my things and left. Cultivation Cave, huh? It appears that there are not only houses but caves too. I checked the pouch and it opened up. This was of course not a dimensional pouch. It was a regular one with 3 pills and a piece of paper telling me of the chores I have to do in the following month. There was also a map of the whole sect on the back of the paper. It gave information on all locations of the sect and where everything is. Even the skill pavilion, which was exactly where I was before. I should have just walked inside and gotten the skill myself instead of giving the token to the deacon. Nevertheless, I'll have to manage with the stuff I have now, and I'll need to get to the cave I'm supposed to cultivate in. I arrived at the cave in almost an hour. And it didn't take me much effort to find it. There was a barren mountain almost at the exit of the sect's boundaries, and there were a few people in it. They all looked haggard and exhausted. Unlike the ones that were closest to the sect's core. The people on the outer sect were utterly miserable. Most of them had their skin sticking to their bones, malnourished, and were weak. Their clothes were wrinkled, dirty, and cut in several places. I'm gonna fit right in. I walked up to my cave, number 3004. It was a small hole dug in the mountain that had a simple stone bed with a sheep's hide for minimal comfort. And an oil lamp. The cave had a boulder that closed and opened once one presented the sect's token to the entrance. Simple, efficient, and enough. I walked in, lit the oil lamp, and used the sect's token to close the cave. I sat down and decided against changing my clothes. I needed to take another bath if I were to wear these. I don't smell right. Also, I was wondering where the book had gone, but almost as the thought crossed my mind, a bright light shone from my chest and the book materialized in front of me. It opened up, and from within the pages came the pouches of the cultivators that tried to kill me in the Poison God's pool. Oh, so you're sentient and hid so no one discovers you. Quite nice. I complimented the book, then felt that it was cringy and awkward that I was talking to a bunch of paper. Most heroes in those books had companions to journey alongside them, that way the reader wouldn't be too bored with the main character's monologues, but that's not the case for me. Perhaps my story will be a boring one, full of loneliness, but who would write about someone such as myself? I'm not hero material, at least not yet. I laughed to myself at the odd thoughts that crossed my mind. It was only by that I could fight off the sense of loneliness and strangeness that I was so suddenly thrown into. I sat on the stone bed in the lotus position and began rotating the energy within me. With the amount of Yin inside my meridians, and the abundance of the green energy from the Yeti that still needed to be processed, I had a few days' worth of energy to circulate and cultivate. Time passed by, and I had to relit the candle 3 times. For every time, a full day had gone by. And once I felt that my extra reserves had all been safely rotated and infused into my meridians, I knew it was time for me to leave the cave. I had some chores to do. Looking at the piece of paper, I realized I needed to do a few things. Fill a few vats worth of water, and chop some logs and bring them down to the firewood storage. Also, pick a few herbs from a nearby mountain. The first 2 chores required a lot of physical strength, which I didn't have. As for the latter, I believe that I would enjoy that. The mountain was already inside the sect, which won't make it too difficult to get, and I have the book to show me the herbs. So, I decided to get the herbs first. As I moved about, I received awkward and disgusted glances from the disciples of the sect. Not that I cared, but I needed to be careful. I'm currently wearing the sect's purple clothes, though I didn't have the opportunity to wash up. It's better to have them on than the other ones. Still, their disgust mostly came from what's wrong with my body, and most of the disciples decided that it was best to move out of my way. Getting to the herb mountain took a pretty long walk, especially with my condition, but nevertheless it was amazing. The whole mountain had a sweet smell to it, refreshing and soul-soothing. There was a good amount of spiritual chi here. Too bad I can't cultivate it, as it is as useful to me as those chi condensation pills. Useless. I walked up the mountain where dozens of other disciples were. They all must have been searching for herbs to submit. But seeing how barren the mountain base was, it was obvious that it was picked clean with all the people coming in here and doing their monthly chores. The herb scent was still strong, however, only it came from the upper part of the mountain. Shit, there is nothing here. I'll have to give up more of my chi condensation pills. This is unfair, one of the kids shouted. I turned to look at him. He looked to be a boy around the age of 14, he had unkempt hair and a few bruises on him. Yet his eyes were shining with the energy of youth. He was alone, unlike the rest who were grouped up together. Then why don't you climb up? There are more herbs there, I replied. Old man, I don't know if you're taunting me or you're truly ignorant, but it's not easy to climb up. The more steps you take, the heavier it gets. I'm surprised you're still able to stand even with your old bones. I don't feel any of the stuff you're talking about. The kid was stunned and immediately came rushing toward me, though I say rushing, it was more like struggling with every step. Shoo, he said. If you have a treasure that helps you walk up the mountain, don't make a scene about it. There are people here who'll do anything to get their hands on stuff you have if it proves useful to you, old man, the kid said. Oh, thank you, I didn't know that, I replied. And so it appears, the law of the jungle is back in play. Now, I don't know who you are, but you must be either strong or have a powerful object to protect you. Just don't show it, mention it, or even act as if you have it. Old man, at least pretend that walking up here is exhausting. Your mere appearance makes people feel disgusted and not look a second time at you, but the moment you go past the 300th step, everyone will notice you. I looked up the mountain. There was still a great steep climb to get to where the herbs were, and if this kid is saying the truth, then I can't draw attention to myself. Kid, tell me, when does this place have the least activity? I asked. Usually at night, when everyone is back in their rooms. Why? Right, do you want to make a deal? I asked him. What sort of deals? I want you to do my chores for me, I stated. Are you insane? I could barely finish my own, and also, I can't even get the herbs. Well, I'll reward you. How about this? I'll give you 1 pill for gathering the logs and another pill for getting the water on my behalf, and also give you a portion of the herbs I get from this mountain. It seems like a good deal, too good to be true. I'm more than willing to get the logs and water filled on your behalf for the pills, but why are you offering to give me herbs? It says in the chore tasks that every herb on the mountain can be exchanged with at least 1 pill. I'm probably able to get a few herbs every time I go up. But I don't have the strength to get the logs and water. Consider it sowing good karma. The kid pondered about it for a while. All right, but you'll have to pay up front, and don't even mention the fact that you could and cannot trust me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have even bothered helping you with hiding your treasure. I smiled at the kid and threw him one of my pills. Take this, once you get all of my logs, come back and I'll pay you for the water, and give you an herb so you complete your monthly quota. Right, thanks, old man. Call me Shen Bao. I'm Meng Hao. I was slightly stunned for a moment. His name was rather familiar and nostalgic. Then I smiled. It's a pleasure to meet you, Meng Hao. The kid climbed down the mountain so fast that I thought he was going to stumble and fall on his face. Yet he didn't lose his momentum and reached the bottom in a few breaths. He then headed toward the woods, to get the logs mostly. I looked up to the sky. The sun was almost at dusk. I'll need to wait here for a while before I could climb up. I don't want anyone seeing how I got to the top, so it's best if I take my time and be patient. Hours went by, and the sun came down. People started climbing down the mountain one by one, while I was sitting in the lotus position waiting for the mountain to clear up. An hour after the sun has fully set and the darkness of the night covered the whole sect, I decided that it was time for me to resume my tasks. I stood up and headed up. The mountain was pretty huge, and with every step I took I risked falling to my death, but thankfully, with so many people going up the mountain every day, they made a path in the mountain that eased access to the upper parts of it. Soon, I was well in the clouds, and the smell was amazing. The herbs on this side of the mountain were numerous. My book vibrated in my chest, signaling me to take a few turns and twists within the mountain top. There was an herb hidden behind a small rock. I pulled the rock and discovered a purple flower. I didn't know what this was, but I yanked it with its roots and placed it in the pouch I got from the sect. I continued moving about, picking herbs left and right. There were so many of them that I couldn't believe my eyes. How come the sect never got up and cleaned this whole place up? It's a wonder. I continued picking the herbs, and at a point, I didn't have enough space in the small pouch, so I began putting them in the book, something I discovered while I was experimenting in the cave. The book can actually work as a storage space. It held the pouches from the cultivators of the poison god's cave, and now the herbs I placed in it was all sucked in. This thing is quite handy. Thankfully I made sure to place all the herbs inside my robes before the book took them in, otherwise, if I had to physically pull out the book, someone might see it. After several hours, I climbed down. There was no need for me to keep picking up herbs. I could clean up the whole thing, and that will definitely be suspicious. What's worse is, this mountain could definitely be monitored by some powerful cultivator. There is a huge risk to it also. If there was a powerful man keeping watch over this mountain, they would easily discover me and keep tabs on me, to see how I could get these herbs unhindered by the pressure that Meng Hao had told me about. I was down to the base of the mountain a few minutes before the first sunlight broke the darkness of the cold night. I headed back to my cave to cultivate a bit and also to learn a bit about the herbs I have gotten. Once I was inside my cave, and had closed it and lit the oil lamp, I began by pulling out the herbs from my pouch and from inside the book. The book began by giving me a description of almost everything I had gotten from the mountain. Drowsy inkberry, a flower that can be used to mend minor wounds, and if tempered well can be used on a quill to write charms and talismans. Grad level 9. Joyful weed. A sweet-smelling herb that is mainly used to relax the muscles and calm the mind. It is good for clearing thoughts but can become addictive and is highly toxic if not treated before consumption. Grade 9. Nightmarish sun drop. Once exposed to daylight, it would cause illusions to anyone close enough to it. A primary ingredient to create the night demon expelling pill. Grade 9. The list continued on and on. Every spiritual herb had a different purpose and had quite an amazing attribute and ability. But I was interested in a couple of the herbs mainly. The joyful weed, and the tricolored doom flower. The joyful weed was, as it said, a drug, and it served a good purpose to me. First of all, it was toxic and would help me cultivate. And the second thing was that it was relaxing and could help reduce some of the pain and soreness I felt usually with my current condition. The second herb was even more interesting. It was the only grade 8 herb in my inventory, the tricolored doom flower. Tricolored doom flower, a deadly flower that sprouts from the corpse of someone who had perished in a een-covered area. The flower can blossom 7 times, reaching its ultimate form, the severn-colored doom flower. It is highly poisonous, and whenever a person perishes due to the effects of the colored doom flower, it will wither and then sprout from his body, creating a higher tiered flower. The cultivation level of every victim of the severn-colored doom flower needs to be higher than the previous person for it to bloom. I made sure to keep those two apart. The first one, I'll be needing soon, and thankfully there were a bunch of them that I gathered. The second one, I only managed to obtain one, so I'll keep it for now. After a couple of days, I heard knocking on my door, or the walls of the cultivation cave I was in. I opened it and Meng Hao was in front of me. He was sweaty, probably from the exertion of having to carry the logs and water, but he had a good bright smile. I got both of your chores for you, so, pay up. Right, that was our deal. Here you go, I replied as I handed him 2 pills and one of the random spirit herbs I gathered. Nice. The Moon Cecilia, this one should get me 2 pills, no takebacks, replied Meng Hao. No need, I have better stuff. Good, still, old man, don't dump them all at the pavilion, it will be suspicious, give them 1 or 2 at best. Yes, I already had the same idea. Thanks, you can leave now, and I'll be counting on you for next month. I replied. As much as I'd like this, you should know, that if you don't do this by yourself, you'll never learn. You need a strong body to cultivate beyond qi condensation. Oh, that's something I didn't know. Man, it's all in the movement technique. I heard you got one. The deacon said he'll procure it for me. That asshole. In your dreams, he'll probably hold your token hostage and delay until you do him favors. You should have handed the token you got yourself. Meng Hao said and left. I thought about what the kid said for a moment, then it made sense. I guess it's time I visit the deacon. I gathered the herbs and placed them in my book, then moved toward the pavilion. Just as I got to its doors, the deacon came rushing towards me. "You, Shen Bao, what are you doing here?" he asked. Suddenly I noticed all the people walking in and out of the pavilion stopping for a moment. They wanted to witness the scene. "I'm here to submit some herbs for my monthly quota," I replied. "H herbs? Spiritual herbs, you have some? Let me see." The deacon eagerly asked. I frowned for a moment but still pulled out the pouch he gave me. The moment he saw the 2 plants inside the pouch, his eyes widened and immediately he feigned uninterest. "Those are just common weeds, they are worthless. Let me take care of them, come back when you find real spiritual herbs." "Oh. Useless herbs?" "Yes. Very common stuff with no spiritual energy, now move away, and just let me take care of this trash." His hand reached to my pouch. One of the kids muttered, "So overbearing, the deacon is trying to cheat the old man of his treasures." I pulled the pouch away and answered, "I beg to differ. I mean, drowsy inkberry is useful to make talismans, not to mention the nightmarish sun drop and its uses." No, you're mistaken, I told you these are just common herbs." "I find it strange. Shouldn't you have at least better knowledge than a mere outer disciple who just started in this sect not even a month now?" A loud booming voice sounded from behind me. Turning, I saw a man, wearing the same type of clothing that senior brother Dual Lin wore. A darker shade of purple, and inner disciple. "This junior dares not offend senior brother Han." "But this is a matter of the outer sect," the deacon replied as he cupped his fists. "I don't give a rat's ass about the outer sect, all I'm interested in is, how did this outer disciple know of the proper name and use of the drowsy inkberry? It was in a subject for the Regiптarius exam. And it's a hard and difficult plant to find, not to mention have knowledge about. So it piqued my interest. If it's hard to find, wouldn't that suggest that it's not possible for him to have this plant, and it could only be a normal herb he found laying about, You're saying I wouldn't know of the drowsy inkberry? Are you questioning my intelligence?" The same kid that murmured before chuckled, "The deacon is in for a beating." "No. Not at all. I'm just saying that there could be a possibility of mistake." "Then how about we take this to the pavilion elder? I'm sure he'd like to know about this." Whoa, this seriously blew out of proportions. I mean, I knew in cultivation stories things tended to get ugly fast, but it's like it's ingrained in these people to make a mountain out of an ant. "I don't think we should bother the elder with such matters," the deacon replied. "But I insist," came the reply of the inner disciple Han. Then the elder disciple placed his hand on the deacon's shoulder and guided him toward the hall. He smiled at me and nodded for me to follow. And so, I did. Sighing along the way, kids nowadays make things really troublesome, I could have handled this myself. As we entered the pavilion, I had to take a moment to take everything in. The whole building was well decorated with old paintings and incense. The reception hall had an enormous shelf full of books behind it, and the whole room was decorated in golden balls that hovered close to the ceiling, lighting the whole thing as if it was daylight. Then came the stairs that led to the upper parts of the pavilion, to its upper levels, and probably to where better stuff was kept in storage. "Elder Yun," called the inner disciple. And from behind the reception desk that I thought no one was behind, came a small man. Yes, not a man afflicted with dwarfism, he was just a small man, not bigger than a 10-year-old. But he had a white beard and a cylindrical hat over his head. Both his arms were tucked behind his back, and his eyes were almost close. His wrinkled face looked like a plot of land that hasn't had a drop of water in years. "Yes, what seems to be the problem?" "We come to appraise a few herbs a fellow outer disciple had found, but the deacon insists, based on his great knowledge of spirit herbs, that the outer disciple only has trash in his hands." The elder frowned. The whole matter didn't seem worth his attention, but since this was an inner disciple in front of him, he had to give him, I always hated this expression, face. "Let's see," replied Elder Yun. He took a single glance at the pouch and immediately said, "This is clearly drowsy inkberry, why is the deacon saying it is not?" The deacon's face turned white as a sheet as he started stuttering. Then the senior brother came in to reprimand him. "I heard that something like this keeps happening here. So I came to inspect. I never believed that the deacon the sect has placed to manage the problems of the outer sect is such a debauched and heartless person. I have several other complaints against him, stealing the allocated pills, taking other cultivators' tokens as a hostage, and allocating caves for whomever he likes against the sect's rule. Is this true, deacon? Asked Elder Yun. The deacon in question began stuttering, unable to reply. As much as I don't wish to interfere in this case. But honestly, this deacon has been acting like a dick since I got here. He also took my token, the token elder who Tian gave me to get the purple cloud movement technique, and never gave me the technique. Is this true? Asked the elder, this time his voice was deeper. Wrathful even. And no. I already had his book prepared, he took it. The deacon lied. Then, we can easily check the records. The elder replied. Soon after he checked the records, his brows rose up and he spoke, saying, how come your name comes up here more than anyone else? You've been taking many things from the pavilion, on behalf of others. Is there any Lung Hu here? Asked the elder. Yes, it's me. It says in the records you have taken a lowerman tier weapon. Where is it? I had never taken such a thing. Actually, this is the first time I entered the hall. Is Yuzan here? The elder asked. Why yes, I'm here. Replied a timid-looking girl. You took a lowerman tier sparring glove? No, I have not. It seems that the deacon has been using the tokens of the outer disciples and exchanging them for items for his own. Look at his gloves. They are the same as the ones that were taken from the records, same as the boots, and a calming ring. You took the outer disciples' contributions and made them your own. The elder said. That's a big oof. The deacon then immediately slammed his head on the wooden floor. I was wrong, please forgive me, elder. You were wrong, you'll be corrected. You'll be stripped of all of your rights, and all items will be confiscated. As for your punishment, that's not my mission though, it is the punishment hall, elder. No, cried out the deacon, that was escorted immediately afterward by a couple of disciples. Well, there seems to be a lot of paperwork to be done here to fix up the mess of this useless trash. I'll take care of this. Anyone who has their items or tokens taken, please submit a report to me. I'll take note of everything. Replied the hall elder. Ah well, then this situation was dealt with rather finely. I half expected to have this whole thing backfire on me, and create a sworn enemy as those MCs do. But seems that things will be fine. Just as I was about to leave, the inner disciple placed his hand on my shoulder and smiled at me. Old man. I'm interested in how you got the knowledge about some of these spiritual herbs. How about you visit me in my place at the inner sect? Just tell the guards that I sent you. We'll have a discussion over tea. This is not a request. Replied the man. And here it comes, I should have not jinxed myself. Shit. Not a request. What does that mean? I asked. It means that you have to come, the inner disciple said. Is there any rule in the sect that says I have to follow what you say? I asked again rather sternly. The man hesitated for a second. This was probably the first time he was ever told off by an outer sect disciple, and it clearly shows. Amateur. Now shoo away, I have no time to waste with you. I got my own stuff to deal with. You, the inner disciple scowled. You what? Didn't your mother teach you to finish your sentences? What the hell am I supposed to understand from one single word that comes out of your mouth? If you have shit to say, say it. If not, get the fuck off of my face. I snapped back at him. The disciple shuddered, his eyeballs felt like they were going to pop out of their sockets. He raised a hand as if he was about to smack me, but a simple cough from the elder behind him had the man gather his hand back and snort as he left. Yep, that's one sworn enemy created right there. I don't know if you're foolish or brave, but what you just did was not smart. You antagonized an inner disciple in front of many people. You made him lose face. Said the elder. Yeah, well, I don't really care. If he needed me, he could have asked. I don't like threats. It's your funeral. Well, I lived long enough, death is not something I fear. Thank you, elder, for your patronage. I'll be leaving to cultivate now. Wait, said the elder, and then handed me a purple-colored book and a few items gathered in a pouch. This is the cultivation manual you were supposed to get from the deacon, and these are some pills as compensation for the troubles that he created and in exchange for the drowsy inkberry. Thank you, that'll come in handy, I replied and took off with the loot. A few students felt that it was necessary to follow me, and they did, from a distance. Now I know how this is all going to unfold. Too many cultivation stories and you get the whole gist of things. First thing will be, these kids will follow me up to where I live, and find out my cultivation cave. Then, one brave dumbass will decide that it would be smart to assault me, break some bones, kill me, or even worse, shatter my cultivation. And if you're thinking that I have my priorities jumbled up, no I don't. I'm not Hermione. In a world of cultivation, having your cultivation shattered is worse than death. As expected, the moment I got to my cave, a young man, probably the age of 16 along with 3 others showed up at my doorsteps right as I opened my cave. You, fellow cultivator Shen Bao, I advise you to give up your belongings and kowtow 10 times in apology for senior brother Han. Ugh, another dumbass stepping stone wannabe. You, I pointed at the kid behind the one who just spoke. Slap that guy and I'll give you a chi condensation pill. The kid in question hesitated then said, no. Oh, I see temptation. I grinned as I said, then how about 3, final offer. The disciple leading the group snorted and said, of course he will not choose dash, but he was abruptly stopped by a slap in the face. He looked at the kid who smacked him and said, why? That's 3 pills more than I get for 3 months worth of hard work. Before the situation would escalate anymore, I threw a pouch at the kid who slapped the other guy and entered my cave, leaving them bickering among each other. As I sat down in my cave, I began to do an inventory. Some of the items I have on me were useless to use as cultivation material, for me, that is. For other cultivators, this could be handy. Most of these herbs are best used in creating pills that enhance cultivation, heal wounds, and cure illnesses. None of that is of any great use to me. But I could exchange them in a venue for something better. But that will have to wait. I don't have access to any auction houses right now. Another thing, I need to get my cultivation going. I have fully stabilized my cultivation but didn't improve upon it ever since I got into the sect. I need to have a higher level of cultivation if I wanted to unlock the bags of the people who got me in the poison cave, to begin with. Perhaps they have some good stuff on them. But without proper poisons to consume, I can't galvanize the poison chi within me to reach the next level. But the joyful weed can. It's toxic in nature and I need that. But I require a pipe. I walked out of the cave and found the guys still fighting among each other. Anyone has a smoking pipe? The kid who got the pills from me, with a black and blue face from all the beating, still flashed me a happy smile as he said, yes, I can get you one. Let me guess, you need another pill. That would be a little too much for just a smoking pipe. I'll get you one for free. Good, I'll remember that favor. And, could you all go and fight somewhere else? You're kind of breaking my concentration. Right, let's go, the kid said, and the 3 others followed him. For a group of people who were on each other's throats, they were pretty sensible. After an hour, the kid came back and knocked on the stone door. In his hand was a nicely decorated pipe. It was long with a small cup-like end. It had a small metallic net to hold tobacco or whatever substance wanted to burn. And it was engraved in silver. It was quite fancy and I liked it. I took the pipe from him, and gave him one of the random herbs I got from the mountain as a reward. He cupped his fists at me and left happy. Time to test the herb. I locked myself in my cave and sat down. Then, I tore some of the petals and placed them on the pipe, then used the lamp to burn the petals and light the pipe. I took a drag and started coughing. This was pretty strong, and didn't taste right at all. Something was wrong, the whole thing didn't light up and needed a lot of fire for it to turn right. Ah. I need to dry it first. Damn. That's gonna be a hassle. I mean, if anyone were to find this laying around, they would undoubtedly take them. I left the cave and began walking toward the pavilion. The elder there would probably have a good idea on where I could dry the joyful weed. Just as I arrived, the elder perked his eyes at me and said, "You smell like weed. Were you smoking?" "Yes, a bad experience, I can tell you that." "But how did you know?" "A kid came to claim a smoking pipe from the pavilion. Also, you have a really strong sweet smell about you. You probably didn't even dry them. The smell on you is too strong, and by the way, the joyful weed is toxic." "I know, it's toxic, but it's helping my cultivation." "Really? After a few days, you'll probably start vomiting blood." "But wait, with the bone and body grinding poison, I think that the effect of it will cancel out the toxic traits of the joyful weed. You'll probably get better hits and stronger effects if you don't detoxify it." "You seem knowledgeable. We old men always keep a bit stashed away. Would you like to try some?" "Real stuff." The elder said. If you're offering, I won't say no, I replied. The men smiled and nodded to one of the disciples. You, continue with the inventory, and handouts of the tokens to the wrong disciples. That deacon made a hell of a mess here. Follow me, said the elder and walked up ahead. The man was really small, almost all the way to my knee small, but he was hella fast. I had to almost jog to keep up with his walking speed. We got up to the second floor of the pavilion and were met with another old man. When he saw the two of us, he frowned at me. Elder Yun, what's the meaning of this? I'm taking this disciple to the upper floor. Don't worry, we won't access the library, we'll just sit at the veranda. Sigh, you found another smoking partner. Yes, Elder Yun smiled. You, what's your name? My name is Shen Bao. I cupped my face at who seemed to be the elder of the second level. If he challenges you to a smoking contest, refuse immediately, you'll make a laughingstock out of yourself. I smiled at the men and said, don't worry about it, I'll keep myself in check. Yeah, you should mind your own business, Elder Zhang. I mean, not everyone has a shitty tolerance such as yourself. Whatever, the floor. Elder Zhang shooed us away and we left to the upper floors. There were several floors and each of them seemed to have a lot of books and manuals. Cultivation manuals. These are manuals for the disciples who prove themselves to the sect. If they get a proper contribution, they can come and choose whatever manual they like from here to help them cultivate. Why not make this public for all to use? I asked. Only the worthy will earn the right to learn. What if there are kids talented in certain aspects that their current disposition does not show, and there is a manual here that could guide them to be stronger? Shouldn't they be considered? The old man shook his head. That's not how sects work. You only prove yourself if you overcome your weak nature. Even if one has the disposition to become a martial god, is deemed trash if they die early. We're not here to rear and raise chicken. We need strong people who will overcome their weak disposition and obtain the right to gain more power. We will not guide the weak to become strong. The weak has to guide themselves to become strong, and once they are worthy, the sect will not spare a dime to help that weak person become a great one. Sounds pretty convincing, though I may have concerns. Still, you're the sect, and this is your rule, I replied. You seem pretty estranged to the rules of sections. Yeah, I am new to the cultivation world, so I have different ideologies. I hope I didn't offend you or the sect. Don't worry, I won't rebuke your ideologies. It's rare to find someone with a different thought process. Most of the people I know have rigid thinking. It's good to be able to discuss topics with another person, especially if they have different views and opinions. We can both learn from the other. I smiled as I walked behind the elder. I think I like this guy. He is very open and has a good heart. I gotta make friends with him. Soon, we reached a veranda that was overseeing the entirety of the outer sect. It was the highest floor on the pavilion and was a great spot to just relax. There was a small go table with black and white stones and 2 cushions and a small pot of tea and 2 cups. A simple setting for a great view. Sit down and let's talk. The old man said and sat as he pulled a small pouch filled with dried joyful weed. This batch still needs to be detoxified. Are you sure you want to smoke it? I have a batch that's pretty well treated. No, I'd rather get the toxic one. Your funeral, the old man replied. I smiled as I grabbed a pinch and placed it in my pipe, then started looking around like a fool for a match to light it. The old man in front of me smirked and snapped his fingers, creating a small red flame that lit up from the top of his index finger. He used the small flame to light his own golden decorated pipe. I frowned as I looked at him, thinking a bit, this could be the same as using chi to use the poison breath skill. But instead of rotating the energy in the meridians and releasing it from the mouth, he released it out of his finger. I looked at my pustule-infested hand and closed my eyes, rotating the energy within my meridians, and instead of sending it to my mouth, I sent it all to my hand. It slowly began to glow. I felt like my hand was about to burst as the tumors began wiggling. I then willed the energy to gather and focus at the tip of my finger, where it shot out like a laser beam up into the sky. A green powerful laser beam. God Almighty! What the heck? Shouted the old man. I have no idea. I just mimicked you. By mimicking me you created a killing move. I'm not that great of a mentor, what the bloody hell. How did you do it? I was still baffled at what the old man was saying, and the light from my fingers dimmed enough that it shaped itself into a flame. I have no idea what happened, but I guess it's something to ponder about. Right, well, use that flame first, and we'll discuss this over a game of Go. I'm really interested in this move of yours. Yeah, sure, I did as I lit the pipe with the green fire coming out of my finger.